She woke up on graduation morning with the memory of a death she had already died. 8 years of pain, betrayal, and loneliness compressed into a single heartbeat of recognition. In her previous life, Isabella Sterling answered her best friend's midnight call for help. It cost her everything: her degree, her future, her life. But now she has a second chance. When Mia's desperate plea lights up her phone at 11:47 p.m., Isabella lets it ring. She lets it ring until the screen goes dark. That single choice changes everything. But freedom comes with a price. Mia and Vanessa do not forgive being ignored. And the man who watched Isabella's destruction from the back row of a courtroom in her past life is now walking toward her with an offer she cannot refuse. This is a story about second chances, about learning to trust again when trust has broken you, and about the unexpected love that finds you when you finally choose yourself. Welcome to Warm Era. Today's story is about a woman who refused to be a victim twice. After a betrayal that destroyed her in her first life, Isabella Sterling gets one chance to make a different choice. One phone call she does not answer, one friendship she walks away from, and one man who sees her worth when she has forgotten it herself. This is the story of how she built a new future on the ashes of the old one. The ceiling was wrong. Isabella Sterling opened her eyes and knew immediately that something had shifted. Not the hospital ceiling with its fluorescent glow and water-stained tiles. Not the rental apartment with the crack in the corner that had grown a little wider every year. This was a popcorn ceiling. Cheap. Familiar. The dorm room ceiling she had stared at for 4 years of undergraduate life. Her hand moved before her brain caught up. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. The date stared back at her, crisp and undeniable. May 15th. 8 years ago. Graduation morning. She sat up so fast the room spun. The twin bed groaned beneath her shifting weight. A desk covered in textbooks she hadn't touched in a lifetime stood against the far wall. A half-empty coffee mug sat next to her laptop. A faint ring of old coffee staining the wood. She remembered that mug. She had bought it at the campus bookstore for $12. A cheap ceramic thing that had held countless cups of instant coffee during all-night study sessions. In her past life, she had packed it in a box when she was expelled. And she had never unpacked it again. The memories hit her in a wave that was anything but gentle. In her previous life, she had answered the call. Mia had called at 11:47 p.m., her voice shaking, her words tumbling over each other in a frantic rush. "I need you. Vanessa's friends are here and they're drunk and they won't leave me alone. Please. Bella. Please." And Isabella had gone. Because that was what best friends did. She had pulled on jeans and a jacket, run out of her dorm without thinking, without questioning why Mia was at a party on the night before graduation, without wondering why Vanessa's friends would be at a lake house miles from campus. She had walked into a trap so perfectly laid that she hadn't seen it coming until the handcuffs clicked shut. The police had arrived 15 minutes after she did. Someone had made an anonymous call, a woman's voice reporting an assault in progress. When they burst through the door, Isabella was standing over a man named Gavin who was bleeding from a cut on his forehead. She had pushed him away from her when he grabbed her arm. That was all. But Mia had screamed that Isabella had attacked him unprovoked. Vanessa had nodded along, her face carefully arranged into an expression of shock and concern. Gavin, a senior from a wealthy family with connections to the university's board, had pressed charges. Isabella had been arrested in front of a room full of strangers. She had been expelled within 72 hours, the university citing a zero-tolerance policy for violence. The Leland Fellowship had been revoked before she could even submit her final materials. Her father had flown in from Europe just to tell her she was no longer his daughter. Her brother had stopped answering her calls. She had spent 7 years fighting a charge she couldn't afford to beat, working minimum-wage jobs that barely covered her rent. Watching from a distance as Mia graduated with honors and accepted the fellowship that should have been hers. And on her deathbed, alone in a hospital room at 30 years old, a weak heart finally giving out after years of stress and poverty and relentless disappointment, Isabella had learned the final truth. A nurse who had attended the same university recognized her name. "Oh, the Chen Vanessa thing," she had said, adjusting Isabella's fore with practiced hands. "Everyone knew about that. Mia Chen and Vanessa Reed set you up. They bragged about it at parties for years. I thought you knew. Isabella had died with that knowledge burning in her chest. Now she was alive. And the ceiling was wrong. And the date was right. And she had a second chance she had never believed in. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mia. Morning. Rumi. Can't believe today is finally here. Son graduation cap meet for breakfast before the ceremony. I want a bestie photo. Isabella stared at the message. The same smiley faces. The same enthusiasm. The same fingers that would dial her number tonight and beg for help that was never needed. She typed back slowly. Already 8. See you at the ceremony. She set the phone face down on the desk and pressed her palms flat against the surface, feeling the worn wood beneath her fingers. Real. Solid. Present. Then she opened her laptop and checked her email. Her fingers moved automatically, muscle memory guiding her to the right folder. The confirmation was still there, exactly as she remembered it. Leland Fellowship Final Interview. Scheduled for June 10th at 10:00 a.m. A panel of 3 judges. A presentation on her proposed thesis. The whole thing had felt like a formality in her past life. She had been the top candidate by every measurable metric. She had never made it to that interview. She had been in a holding cell. This time, she would walk into that room. The graduation ceremony was held in the main quad at 10 in the morning. White chairs stretched across the lawn in precise rows, their backs straight and identical. Families filled the bleachers. Cameras raised. Handkerchiefs already dabbing at eyes. The sun was too bright for a day that had once destroyed her. The sky too blue. The air too sweet with the scent of fresh-cut grass and blooming flowers. Isabella sat in the 3rd row, her gown pressed and wrinkle-free, her cap sitting square on her head. She didn't search for Mia in the crowd. She didn't need to. She knew exactly where Mia would be. Front row. Center. Waving at her parents with practiced charm. Playing the perfect daughter. The devoted friend. The innocent bystander. The dean called the graduates by school. Business school went 3rd. Isabella rose when her name was announced. Isabella Marie Sterling. Bachelor of Science in Business Administration. Magna cum laude. And walked across the stage on legs that felt both too steady and not steady enough. She took the diploma. Shook the dean's hand. The leather folder was smooth and cool against her fingers. In her previous life, this moment had been stolen from her. She had never walked across this stage. She had never held this diploma. She had been sitting in a police station, still in her pajamas, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. She found a spot near the old oak tree after the ceremony, away from the crowds and the noise and the celebration. Families were taking photos. Students were throwing caps into the air. And somewhere a string quartet was playing a rendition of the school's alma mater. She watched it all from a distance, her diploma pressed against her chest like a shield. That was when she saw him. Adrian Chase was standing at the edge of the crowd, deep in conversation with Professor Hartley. He was taller than she remembered, broader across the shoulders, his posture relaxed and confident. Dark hair, clean jaw, a navy blazer that fit him perfectly despite the heat. In her past life, she had barely known him. He was a graduate student in the business school, 1 year ahead of her, quiet and reserved. The kind of person who seemed to exist in the margins of every room he entered. She had exchanged maybe 10 words with him in 4 years. But she remembered the trial. She had been sitting in the courtroom, handcuffed and hollow-eyed, wearing a cheap suit her brother had refused to pay for. The gallery was full of strangers who had come to watch the scandal unfold. Mia was there, crying into a handkerchief at precisely calculated intervals. Vanessa was there too, her expression carefully neutral, her hands folded in her lap like she was attending a funeral. Isabella's family was conspicuously absent. Her father had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her, and her brother had stopped answering her calls the day the charges were filed. And in the back row, alone, had sat Adrian Chase. She hadn't understood why he was there. She had assumed he was a witness for the prosecution, called to testify against her, but he had never been summoned to the stand. He had sat through the entire proceeding, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on the judge. When the gavel fell and the verdict was read, he had stood, walked out, and disappeared into the crowd without a backward glance. She had never asked him why he had come. Now he was 30 feet away, laughing at something Professor Hartley had said. His head tilted back. His shoulders relaxed. His eyes scanned the crowd idly. The way people's eyes do when they're not really looking for anything. They landed on her, held for a moment longer than necessary. She looked away first. Her phone buzzed. Mia again. Where did you go? I wanted a photo together. Pleading face, the one from freshman orientation is my profile pic and it's so old. Isabella typed back with steady fingers. Family is waiting. Another time. The lie came easily. Her family wasn't here. They hadn't come to her graduation. They hadn't come to anything. Her mother had died when she was 16. A quiet passing that had left a hole in the shape of a person. Her father had remarried within the year and moved to Switzerland, sending tuition payments but never visiting. She had a brother who hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. Not since she had refused to co-sign a loan for a business venture he had never started. She was alone, but alone was better than trapped. She walked back to her dorm room at 3 in the afternoon. The room was half-packed, cardboard boxes stacked against the wall, clothes folded on the bed, the shelves stripped of books and trinkets. She had until midnight to clear out. The RA had been clear about that. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The Leland Fellowship application was open in her browser. The confirmation page still loaded from weeks ago. She had submitted it on April 28th. Before the rebirth. Before she had known what was coming. The interview was in 26 days. 26 days to prepare. 26 days to breathe. The clock on her laptop read 6:00 p.m. 6 hours until the call. She closed the laptop and pulled out her grandmother's necklace from the jewelry box. It was a simple gold chain with a small pendant attached. A sterling silver rose. Its petals carefully etched. Its stem curling into a delicate loop. Her grandmother had given it to her on her 18th birthday, pressing it into her palm with thin, trembling fingers. This was my mother's, she had said, and her mother's before that. It's been passed down through 4 generations of women in our family. Keep it close, Isabella. It will open doors you don't know exist. In her past life, Isabella had pawned it for bail money she couldn't afford. She had stood in a pawn shop on a dirty street, watching a man with yellowed fingernails examine the necklace through a magnifying glass. He had offered her $200. She had taken it without negotiating. She had never seen the necklace again. She clasped it around her neck now, the metal warm against her skin, the pendant settling just above her collarbone. It felt right. It felt like armor. Then she waited. At 11:30 p.m., her phone lit up. Mia's contact photo filled the screen, a selfie of them at a coffee shop, laughing, faces pressed together, a blurry background of latte art and autumn leaves. Isabella had taken that photo. She remembered the day. They had been studying for a midterm, and Mia had said something ridiculous about their professor's bow tie, and Isabella had laughed so hard she had snorted her coffee. Mia had grabbed her phone and snapped the picture mid-laugh. Looking at it now, Isabella felt nothing. The phone buzzed again. She picked it up. Bella. Mia's voice came through the speaker, strained and high-pitched. Are you awake? Isabella didn't answer. She held the phone to her ear and listened. Bella, please. I need you. I'm at the lake house and Vanessa's friends are here and they're drunk and I don't feel safe. Please come. Please. A pause. A shaky breath. I'm scared. The words were almost identical to what Isabella remembered. She had replayed them in her mind 1,000 times during the years that followed, turning them over and over like stones, searching for the cracks. The same desperate tone. The same calculated urgency. The same performance. She pressed the end call button. The line went dead. She set the phone down on the desk, face up, and picked up her grandmother's necklace again. She rolled the pendant between her thumb and forefinger, feeling the smooth edges worn soft by decades of touch. The silver caught the light from her desk lamp and threw a tiny reflection onto the ceiling. In her previous life, she had rushed to save a friend who had never been in danger. She had run into a trap with her eyes wide open, trusting the wrong person, believing the wrong words, paying the ultimate price for loyalty that was never returned. In this life, she stayed. The phone buzzed twice more. She didn't pick up. At 12:03 a.m., a text arrived from Mia. Where are you? I needed you. I can't believe you didn't come. Isabella typed her response slowly, one letter at a time. I can't come. I'm sorry. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't anything. She was empty and clean and free. She pulled the charger from her phone, packed her laptop into her bag, and zipped her suitcase closed. The train left at 7:00 a.m. She had a fellowship interview in 26 days, and for the first time in 2 lives, she was going to make it. The train station was nearly empty at 6:30 in the morning. Isabella sat on a cold metal bench with her suitcase wedged between her feet, a paper cup of station coffee warming her hands. The coffee was bitter and over-extracted, the kind of coffee that existed solely to wake people up, not to be enjoyed. The station smelled like diesel exhaust and stale bread and the particular mustiness of old buildings that had seen too many departures. She didn't mind any of it. She had spent the night staring at the ceiling of her dorm room, waiting for the door to burst open. In her past life, the police had come at 2 in the morning, pounding on her door with open palms, waking the entire floor. They had found her alone, half asleep, still confused about why she was being arrested. She had gone willingly, still believing that the truth would set her free, still naive enough to think that justice was something the world actually delivered. In this life, no one came. No pounding on the door. No flashing lights in the parking lot. No handcuffs. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car passing on the street below. The train arrived at 6:47 a.m. She boarded without a backward glance. Her new apartment was a studio in the city, 300 square feet with a window that faced a brick wall and a kitchen that was really just a countertop with a hot plate. It was cheap. It was small. It was hers. She had found it through a rental listing that hadn't existed in her past life, a butterfly effect from her changed choices. In her previous life, she had never needed an apartment. She had been expelled before graduation day ended, arrested before she could pack her bags, whisked away to a holding cell before she could sign a lease. She had gone straight to her father's house after the trial, and he had told her she was no longer his daughter. This time, she had planned ahead. She had applied for the apartment online 3 days before graduation, submitted her deposit, and signed the lease without ever seeing the place in person. It was a risk, but she had learned that some risks were worth taking. She unpacked her suitcase in 20 minutes. Clothes went into the closet, books went onto the shelf on the wall. Her laptop went onto the tiny desk that fit perfectly into the corner by the window. Her grandmother's necklace went into the small safe she had bought with cash from a hardware store, a precaution she had never needed in her past life. She spun the lock on the safe, set the combination, and closed the door. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. Isabella, this is Caroline from the Leland Fellowship office. I'm calling to confirm your interview on June 10th at 10:00 a.m. in the Harrington Building, room 312. Please arrive 15 minutes early and bring 2 copies of your proposal. She saved the number under Fellowship Office. Then she opened her laptop and began to prepare. 3 days later, she walked into the university library for the first time since graduation. It was a risk. Mia and Vanessa were probably still in the area. Mia's family was hosting a post-graduation dinner at a restaurant downtown, and Vanessa was helping her father with the trustee board's summer planning. But Isabella needed information. She needed to confirm what she remembered from her past life, to verify the details that had been buried under years of pain and survival. The library was quiet in the summer lull between semesters. The main reading room was nearly empty. Just a few graduate students hunched over their laptops and a janitor pushing a mop down the far aisle. The air smelled like old paper and wood polish, the same smell that had greeted her every morning for 4 years. She found Elena Rose at the circulation desk, knitting a pale blue scarf with practiced, rhythmic movements. Elena was a small woman in her late 60s, with silver white hair and glasses that hung from a chain around her neck. She had worked at this library for 40 years. She knew every student by name, every book by location, every secret the building had ever held. Elena looked up over her glasses, her needles never pausing. Isabella Sterling, I thought you'd be on a beach somewhere, celebrating. Not yet. I have an interview in a few weeks. The Leland Fellowship. Isabella nodded. She had mentioned it to Elena once, months ago, while checking out a stack of books for her thesis on market behavior in emerging economies. Elena remembered everything. She had a mind like a filing cabinet, organized and precise. Elena set down her knitting. Good. You deserve it. I've seen a lot of students come through these doors over the years. You're one of the few who actually read the books instead of just scanning the indexes. A pause. Is there something I can help you with? Actually, I was hoping to access the archived email system. I need to retrieve some of my old files. Isabella. The voice came from behind her, sharp and familiar. Isabella turned. Mia was standing at the entrance of the library, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. She was wearing a sundress that Isabella remembered buying with her at a thrift store 2 years ago. She looked smaller than Isabella remembered, softer, less substantial. Isabella, I need to talk to you. Mia's voice was thin, wavering, carefully calibrated to sound hurt. I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. Elena glanced between them, her expression unreadable. I'll be at the desk if you need me. Isabella waited until Elena was out of earshot, then turned to face Mia fully. She kept her posture relaxed, her expression neutral. What do you want? What do I want? Mia's voice cracked on the last word. You didn't come. I called you. I texted you. I was at that party alone and scared and you just left me there. You didn't even ask what happened. Isabella studied her. The performance was good. The trembling lip, the glassy eyes, the slightly hunched shoulders. In her past life, Isabella would have wrapped her arms around Mia and apologized 100 times. She would have believed every tear, every tremor. But she had seen the emails. She had read the words Mia had typed with her own fingers. She had seen her name reduced to a bullet point in a plan to destroy her. You're fine, Isabella said. Her voice was flat. What? You're standing here. You're alive. You're fine. Isabella kept her voice level, her eyes steady. So whatever happened at that party, you handled it. You didn't need me. Mia blinked. The tears stopped flowing as if a tap had been turned off. That's not the point. The point is you didn't come when I needed you. What kind of friend abandons someone who's scared and alone? I already apologized. I said I was sorry. That's all I can do. Sorry. Mia's voice rose. You say sorry and that's it. For years of friendship and you're fine. Isabella cut her off. You're standing in a library. And you're fine. Whatever happened, you survived. I'm glad. But I can't be the person you call anymore. She walked past Mia without touching her, without slowing down. She walked to the circulation desk, where Elena was watching with sharp, knowing eyes. The archive room, Isabella said. You said the public terminals were still active for 30 days. Elena pulled out a key card from a drawer and slid it across the counter. Third door on the left. Take your time. The archive room was small and windowless, barely large enough for 3 computers on 3 metal desks. The air was stale and cool, heavy with the smell of old electronics and dust. Isabella chose the computer farthest from the door and sat down. She logged in with her old student credentials. The system accepted them without question. She opened the email search function and typed in a date range. 3 weeks ago, the week Mia and Vanessa had started their planning. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. In her past life, she had found these emails too late. A former IT employee had forwarded them to her years afterward. A guilt offering from someone who had known what was happening and had said nothing. By then, Isabella's life was already in pieces. The emails had been a confirmation of what she already knew, not a tool she could use. This time, she was early. She searched for emails between Mia Chen and Vanessa Reed. 3 results appeared. The first was dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line, Friday. Vanessa, I talked to Gavin. He's in. He'll be at the lake house Friday night. Make sure Isabella gets the invitation. M. The second was dated 2 weeks ago. Subject line, the timeline. Vanessa, here's the schedule. I call Isabella at 11:47. Gavin arrives at midnight. Police called at 12:15. By 12:30, she's in handcuffs. The fellowship board meets on Tuesday. If she's got an arrest record, she's automatically disqualified. Perfect timing. M. Isabella read the words twice. Then she saved both emails to her personal account. A third email appeared in the search results. Subject line: Backup plan. If Isabella doesn't show up, we need an alternative. Her laptop has her thesis files saved locally. If those get deleted the night before her defense, she misses the deadline anyway. Gavin has access to her building. He can get into her room while she's at the ceremony. Isabella stared at the screen. Her laptop. They had planned to delete her thesis files. If she had somehow avoided the arrest, they would have destroyed months of her work. They had thought of everything. She closed the search window and sat in the silence of the archive room, the glow of the monitor casting pale light across her face. Then she pulled the key card from her pocket, stood up, and walked out. She handed the card back to Elena with steady hands. Find what you needed? Elena asked, her needles clicking back into rhythm. No, Isabella said, sliding the key card back across the counter. I found more. Elena's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. Come back if you need anything else. The archives aren't going anywhere. Isabella left the library with the emails burning in her phone and a new sense of purpose settling into her bones. She walked home through the city streets, past coffee shops and bookstores and the old theater where she had once watched a movie with Mia. The streets were busy with afternoon foot traffic, people rushing to meetings and appointments and lives she couldn't see. Her mind was racing. She had the emails. She had the names. She had the timeline. But emails could be explained away. Screenshots could be dismissed as fabrications. She needed something solid, something that would hold up under scrutiny. Her phone buzzed as she reached her apartment building. A text from an unknown number. Isabella Sterling. This is Adrian Chase. I found your contact in the business school directory. I have a business proposal I'd like to discuss with you. Would you be available to meet this week? She stopped on the steps of her building and read the message twice. Adrian Chase. The man who had sat in the back row of her trial. The man who had watched her destruction from a distance and never explained why. The man who was now, apparently, reaching out with a business proposal. She typed back, when and where. His response came within seconds. Coffee shop on Maple Street. Tomorrow at 3:00 p.m. I'll be at the corner table by the window. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She had a meeting. Back in her apartment, she opened her laptop and pulled up everything she could find about Adrian Chase. A LinkedIn profile that was sparse on details. A faculty page that mentioned he was pursuing his MBA with a focus on venture capital. A handful of articles from the university newspaper about a startup competition he had won 2 years ago. Nothing about his family. Nothing about why he had been at her trial. She closed the laptop and leaned back in her chair. The wall outside her window was still there. Red brick and unremarkable. The light was fading, casting long shadows across her small apartment. Her phone screen showed a new notification. A missed call from an unknown number. No voicemail. She checked the time. 6:15 p.m. 21 hours until her meeting with Adrian Chase. She had emails saved on her laptop. She had a timeline in her head. She had a second chance that her past self would never have believed possible. And she was done being a victim. Tomorrow, she would find out what Adrian Chase wanted. And then she would decide if he was an ally she could trust or just another person who wanted something from her. She pulled up the Leland Fellowship preparation materials on her laptop and began to work. The interview was in 23 days. She had a presentation to prepare, a business proposal to research, and a past life to leave behind. The necklace rested against her collarbone, warm and steady, as the sun set beyond the brick wall and the city settled into evening. Somewhere across town, Mia was probably still crying on cue. Vanessa was probably planning her next move. And Adrian Chase was probably sitting in his apartment, wondering what kind of woman he had just texted. Isabella smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Let them wonder. The coffee shop on Maple Street was called The Daily Grind, and it looked exactly the way a coffee shop in a college town should look. Exposed brick walls faded to a warm terracotta color. Mismatched furniture, a velvet armchair next to a wooden bench, a metal table with 3 different chairs around it. A chalkboard menu that listed drinks with names like The Procrastinator's Latte and Thesis Defense Espresso. The air smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon. And a folk song Isabella didn't recognize played quietly from a speaker in the corner. Isabella arrived at 2:55 p.m. She didn't take the corner table by the window. She chose a table near the back, close to the emergency exit. She wanted her back to a wall and her eyes on the door. Old habits from a past life spent watching over her shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. She ordered black coffee from a barista with a nose ring and took her seat. The coffee was good, better than the station coffee. At least. She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic mug and waited. Adrian Chase walked in at exactly 3:00 p.m. He was wearing the same navy blazer from graduation day, this time over a gray t-shirt that made him look less like a businessman and more like someone who had just come from a workout. His hair was slightly damp at the edges, as if he had showered recently and hadn't bothered to dry it properly. He spotted her immediately, his eyes finding her across the crowded room without hesitation, and crossed the floor with easy, confident strides. He didn't sit down right away. He stopped at her table, holding a black leather folder in one hand, and looked at her for a moment before speaking, not sizing her up. Exactly. More like he was confirming something he already knew. "Thank you for meeting me." Isabella gestured to the empty chair across from her. "You didn't give me much choice. Your text was vague." "I know." He sat down, placing the folder on the table between them. His movements were deliberate, unhurried. "I wanted to talk to you in person. Some conversations shouldn't happen over text. You could have called." "I could have." A pause. "But I didn't think you'd answer a call from a number you didn't recognize. And I needed you to see my face when I told you what I know." That got her attention. "What do you know?" Instead of answering, Adrian opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table, his fingers brushing the edge before pulling back. It was a business proposal, a partnership agreement for something called the Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative. Isabella read the first paragraph. It was a proposal to enter the university's annual incubator competition, a startup pitch contest with a prize of $50,000 in seed funding and a year of free office space in the university's incubator. She remembered the competition from her past life. It had been one of the big events of the business school calendar, attracting investors and alumni every year. In her past life, she had never entered. She had been expelled before applications opened. She looked up. "You want me to be your partner on a market research project for the incubator competition?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I've seen your work." He leaned back in his chair, his eyes steady on hers. There was no flattery in his voice, no attempt to charm. He was stating facts. "Your thesis on emerging market behavior was the best thing the business school has produced in 5 years. Professor Hartley agrees." "When I told him I was looking for a partner for the incubator, he mentioned your name before I finished the sentence." Isabella studied the proposal more carefully. It was thorough market analysis, competitive landscape, financial projections broken down by quarter. Adrian had clearly put weeks of work into it. The research was solid, the logic sound, the projections conservative enough to be credible. "I'm not a student anymore," she said. "I graduated 3 days ago. The incubator is open to recent graduates for 12 months after graduation. You qualify." He tapped the paper with his index finger. "And you'd be the strongest partner I could ask for. Your analytical skills complement my background in venture capital. Together, we'd have a real chance of winning." She set the paper down and met his eyes. "What's your angle?" "My angle? Everyone has an angle. You're a graduate student in the MBA program. You could find any partner you want. Why a recent graduate who lives in a 300-square-foot studio and doesn't have a job lined up?" Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his folder and pulled out a second piece of paper. He placed it on the table between them without a word. Isabella looked down. Her blood went cold. It was a printout of an email. One of Mia's emails. The one about the timeline. The one that laid out, in cold, precise language, the plan to have her arrested on graduation night. I called the timeline email. Here's the schedule. Mia calls Isabella at 11:47. Gavin arrives at midnight. Police called at 12:15. By 12:30, she's in handcuffs. She read the words twice before she could speak. Where did you get that? I have a contact in the IT department. Adrian's voice was calm, steady. I asked them to monitor certain accounts after graduation. I had a feeling something was going to happen. You had a feeling? I've been watching Mia Chen and Vanessa read for 6 months. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. They've done this before. Last year, a girl named Jessica Tran was disqualified from the Hadley Scholarship competition after someone reported her for academic dishonesty. The accusation was false. The committee found no evidence of wrongdoing. But by the time they cleared her name, the deadline had passed. The scholarship went to someone else. Isabella stared at him. Jessica Tran. She remembered that name. A quiet economics major who had been in her statistics class. She had left school in the middle of the spring semester, and no one had known why. The rumors had been vague: family problems, personal issues, a breakdown. No one had asked too many questions. You think Mia and Vanessa did that to her? I know they did. Adrian's jaw tightened. Jessica was my study partner for 2 years. She was the most honest person I've ever met. When she was accused of cheating, I didn't believe it. I started asking questions. That's when I found the pattern. He pulled out a third piece of paper and laid it on the table. A timeline. 3 names. 3 dates. 3 academic careers destroyed. Sarah Kim. Spring semester 2 years ago. Accused of plagiarism. The charges were dropped. But she lost her internship offer. Mia got the internship. Marcus Webb. Fall semester last year. Accused of harassment. The investigation cleared him, but he transferred schools. Vanessa got his spot on the student board. Jessica Tran. Spring semester this year. Accused of cheating. Cleared. But too late. The scholarship went to Mia. Isabella's hands were cold. She set down her coffee cup and pressed her palms flat against the table, feeling the worn wood beneath her fingers. A timeline. A pattern. A system. Why are you telling me this? Because you were supposed to be the 4th. Adrian's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. When I saw the email traffic spike after graduation, I knew they were planning something. I didn't know what, but I knew you were the target. You're saying they've been doing this for years. I'm saying they've been doing this for years, and no one has stopped them. Not the university, not the faculty, not the students who knew something was wrong but didn't want to get involved. He paused. Until now. Isabella looked at the papers spread across the table. The proposal, the email, the timeline, evidence of a conspiracy she had suspected but never been able to prove. And you want to help me? I want to partner with you. He met her eyes and held them. The incubator project gives us a legitimate reason to work together. We can share information, watch our backs, and build something real at the same time. It's practical. Practical. She repeated the word slowly, testing it. You're asking me to trust you. I'm asking you to consider a partnership. He slid the proposal back across the table, his fingers brushing the edge. Read it. Think about it. My number is at the bottom. He stood up. Isabella didn't move. One more thing, he said. Jessica told me something before she left. She said the worst part wasn't losing the scholarship. It was losing her belief that people were basically good. A pause. I don't want you to lose that too. He walked out of the coffee shop, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving Isabella alone with the proposal and 3 pieces of paper that changed everything. She sat there for a long time, staring at the emails spread across the table. The coffee in front of her had gone cold. The folk song had changed to something jazzier. Customers came and went, but she stayed motionless, her mind turning over everything Adrian had said. A pattern, a system, 3 victims before her, and she had almost been the 4th. She thought about the email, the way Mia had written her name as if she were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed. She thought about the backup plan, the deletion of her thesis files, the thoroughness of the destruction they had planned, and she thought about the man sitting across from her, who had spent 6 months collecting evidence that no one else had bothered to find. He was still sitting there, waiting. His hands were folded on the table, his expression patient. He had given her information. He had given her time. He wasn't asking for anything in return. Yet, she didn't know if she trusted him, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. And in a game where the other side had been playing for years, having an ally, even an untested one, was better than having none. She folded the papers carefully, placed them in her bag alongside her laptop, and stood up. Adrian stood with her. "I'll read the proposal tonight," she said. "Take your time." And Adrian. She met his eyes. "Thank you. For the information. For telling me the truth." He nodded once. "I'll be waiting for your call." She walked out of the coffee shop into the afternoon sun, the papers heavy in her bag, the weight of new knowledge settling into her shoulders. The street was busy with late afternoon foot traffic, students heading to evening classes, office workers grabbing caffeine boosts, couples lingering over shared pastries. Life moving on. Completely unaware that in one corner of one coffee shop, a conspiracy had been laid bare, she walked home slowly, letting her mind process everything. The email, the timeline, the 3 victims, the pattern that stretched back years. She had come to this meeting expecting a business proposal. She had left with a roadmap of the war she was already in. When she reached her apartment building, she didn't go inside immediately. She sat on the front steps, watching the sun lower toward the rooftops, turning the sky shades of orange and pink. The necklace was warm against her skin. She touched the pendant and thought about her grandmother, a woman who had survived her own betrayals, who had passed down a piece of silver as a reminder that some things endured. Her phone buzzed as the last light faded. A text from an unknown number, area code she didn't recognize. "Isabella. It's Jessica Tran. Adrian gave me your number. I want to talk. Not about testifying. About what I know. Call me when you can." Isabella stared at the message. Then she saved the number under Jessica T. and typed back, "I'll call tomorrow. Thank you." The response came quickly. "No, thank you." She smiled, a real smile. The first one in days. She folded the papers carefully, placed them in her bag, and walked out into the afternoon sun. The next morning, she called the number at the bottom of the proposal. "Adrian Chase. I read it. And I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I keep copies of everything we find. Every document, every email, every recording. I'm not handing over evidence without a chain of custody." "Agreed." "Second, if this partnership interferes with my fellowship interview in any way, I walk. The Leland Fellowship is my priority. It's non-negotiable." "Understood." "Third." She hesitated. "I want to meet Jessica Tran, if she's willing to talk to me." There was a pause on the other end of the line. She could hear him breathing, considering. "I can arrange that," he said finally, "but she's not in the city anymore. She moved back home after she dropped out. It's about 3 hours north. Then I'll go to her." Another pause. "Longer this time. When do you want to leave?" "Tomorrow morning. I'll pick you up at 7. The line clicked. Isabella lowered her phone and looked at it for a moment. Then she set it down on her desk, next to the incubator proposal and the printed emails. She was done waiting for things to happen to her. She was going to make them happen. Adrian arrived at exactly 7 o'clock the next morning. Isabella was waiting on the steps of her apartment building, a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a messenger bag slung across her body. She had dressed in jeans and a simple blouse, comfortable for a long drive, and she had her grandmother's necklace tucked safely under her collar. Adrian pulled up in a silver sedan. It was clean and unremarkable, the kind of car designed to attract no attention. He leaned across and pushed the passenger door open. "Ready." She climbed in. "Ready." The drive to Jessica Tran's hometown took 3 hours. Adrian drove with both hands on the wheel, his eyes on the road, his silence comfortable rather than awkward. He didn't try to fill the space with small talk. He didn't ask personal questions. He just drove. Isabella spent the first hour reviewing the incubator proposal in her lap. She had read it 3 times the night before, marking it up with questions and suggestions in the margins. The research was thorough, the financial projections conservative, the competitive analysis sharp. Adrian had clearly put significant work into it. "Your market sizing assumptions are conservative," she said, not looking up. "I'd rather underpromise and overdeliver. The competitor analysis is thin on page 7. You only covered 3 of their 5 product lines." "I noticed that." I was hoping you'd fill in the gaps. She glanced at him. He was watching the road, but there was a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. You're testing me. I'm evaluating my partner. He glanced at her. You passed. She turned back to the proposal, but she was aware of a subtle shift in the atmosphere between them. Not tension. Exactly. Something closer to recognition. The feeling of two people who understood each other without needing to say much. The farmland stretched out around them as they left the city behind. Fields of corn and soybeans alternated with clusters of trees and the occasional farmhouse. The sky was wide and blue, and the sun was warm through the car window. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. You can ask. Why did you start investigating Mia and Vanessa? Before me. I mean, before Jessica. Adrian was quiet for a moment. His hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Because I knew something was wrong, and no one else was asking questions. He paused. The university has a system for handling misconduct accusations. It's designed to protect the accuser. The assumption is that no one would make a false accusation because the stakes are too high. But that assumption is wrong. So you started digging. I started paying attention. I noticed that certain students kept winning. Mia Chen, Vanessa Reed. And the students who lost to them kept having things in common. They were ambitious. They were talented. And they had less family money than the people they were competing against. Isabella absorbed that. You think Mia and Vanessa target people who can't afford to fight back. I know they do. Jessica's parents run a dry cleaner. They spent their savings on a lawyer to fight an accusation that was eventually dropped. Mia's father is a lawyer. Vanessa's father is a trustee. The system is designed for people like them. And the university doesn't care. I think the university cares about not having scandals. If they investigate Mia and Vanessa, they have to admit that their system failed. That's a liability they don't want. Isabella turned to look out the window. The field stretched on, flat and endless. So you decided to handle it yourself. Not by myself. He glanced at her. I'm handling it with you. They arrived at Jessica Tran's house at 10:30 in the morning. It was a small ranch house on a quiet street, with a well-maintained lawn and a tire swing hanging from an oak tree in the front yard. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A child's bicycle lay on its side in the driveway. Jessica answered the door in sweatpants and a university hoodie. She looked older than Isabella remembered, not in age, but in the way people look when they've been carrying something heavy for too long. Her hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes had shadows under them that no amount of sleep would fix. Isabella Sterling. Jessica's voice was flat, neutral. Adrian said you might come. Thank you for seeing me. Jessica stepped aside. Come in. The living room was modest but comfortable. A couch covered in a floral pattern. A coffee table with magazines neatly stacked. A television playing a home renovation show on mute. The colors bright and cheerful in contrast to the quiet tension in the room. Jessica sat in an armchair, pulling her knees up to her chest and wrapping her arms around her legs. So, she said, Adrian told you about me. He told me you were accused of cheating. Accused. Jessica laughed. But there was no humor in it, just a hollow sound that echoed in the quiet room. That's a generous word. I was reported for academic dishonesty 3 days before the final round of the Hadley Scholarship. The scholarship committee launched an investigation. It took 2 weeks. They interviewed my professors, reviewed my work, checked my files. They found no evidence of wrongdoing. Nothing. Zero. But the deadline passed. The deadline passed. Jessica's voice hardened. The scholarship was awarded to someone else. By the time the committee cleared my name, the funds had already been allocated. They said they were sorry. They said they'd keep me in mind for future opportunities. But there were no future opportunities. The scholarship was a one-time thing. And it was gone. Mia Chen got it. I don't know the name of the girl who won. I don't want to know. Jessica shook her head. What I know is that someone reported me with false evidence. And the system didn't protect me. It doesn't matter who did it. The result is the same. Isabella reached into her bag and pulled out a copy of the emails she had found in the library archives. She handed them to Jessica. Jessica read them in silence. Her face didn't change as she read the timeline. The backup plan. The cold calculation of someone else's destruction. When she finished, she looked up with something new in her eyes. Not surprise. Not anger. Recognition. You have proof. I have emails. They're not enough on their own, but they're a start. Jessica looked at the emails again, her eyes scanning the lines. The timeline email. It mentions the police. They were going to have you arrested. Isabella nodded. Jessica's hands were shaking. They escalated. With me. It was just the cheating accusation. A paper trail that could be denied. With you. They were going to involve the police. They were going to give you a criminal record. It didn't work. Isabella kept her voice steady. I didn't go to the party. How did you know? Isabella considered the question. The truth was too complicated to explain. A rebirth. A past life. Knowledge she shouldn't have. She settled for a simpler version. I had a strong feeling. A very strong feeling. Jessica studied her for a long moment, her eyes searching Isabella's face for something. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. She nodded slowly. Good. Trust your feelings. Adrian, who had been standing by the door with his hands in his pockets, spoke for the first time since they had entered. Jessica, would you be willing to testify if we build a case against them? If we have enough evidence to bring to the board? Jessica was quiet for a long time. The television played on mute, showing before and after shots of a kitchen renovation. A clock ticked somewhere in the house. Why now? She asked finally. Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it that cut through the silence of the room. Why now? After all this time? Why didn't anyone help me when it happened? When I was drowning? When I was losing everything I had worked for? Where were you? Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her knees to steady them. I was at Mia's apartment the night before the accusation. Jessica continued, her voice growing tighter. I saw Vanessa there. I didn't think anything of it at the time. They were friends. Of course they were together. But looking back, I should have known. I should have seen the signs. You couldn't have known, Isabella said quietly. Neither could you. Jessica met her eyes. But you're here now. You're doing something. That's more than anyone else did. Adrian, who had been standing by the door with his hands in his pockets, spoke for the first time since they had entered. Jessica, would you be willing to testify if we build a case against them? If we have enough evidence to bring to the board or to the press? Jessica was quiet for a long time. The television played on mute, showing before and after shots of a kitchen renovation. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, marking the seconds. Why now? She asked again. Why didn't anyone help me when it happened? Because I wasn't watching then. Adrian's voice was steady, unflinching. I am now. And I'm sorry it took this long. Jessica looked at Isabella. Do you trust him? I'm learning to. Isabella held her gaze. He showed up with evidence I didn't ask for. He drove 3 hours to bring me here. He's not asking for anything in return. That's more than I expected from anyone. Isabella thought about the question. She thought about the proposal, the evidence, the way Adrian had shown up at the coffee shop with information he didn't have to share. She thought about the 3-hour drive and the comfortable silence and the way he had said I'm handling it with you. I'm learning to, she said. Jessica nodded. Then I'll think about it. Jessica stood, smoothing her sweatpants. I can't promise anything, but I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. Adrian extended his hand. Jessica took it after a moment's hesitation. Take care of her, Jessica said, nodding toward Isabella. She's walking into the same fire I walked into. Don't let her burn. I won't. They left the house at 11:30. The dog down the street was still barking. The child's bicycle was still lying in the driveway. The tire swing hung motionless in the still morning air. The drive back was quieter than the drive there. Isabella watched the farmland turn back into suburbs. And the suburbs turned back into city. Strip malls gave way to apartment complexes, which gave way to office buildings and traffic lights. You didn't tell her the truth, Adrian said as they approached the city limits. About what? About how you knew not to go to the party. Isabella was silent. You don't have to tell me, he said, but if we're going to be partners, I need to know that what you know is reliable. She looked at him. His eyes were on the road, but his hands were relaxed on the wheel. He wasn't pressing. He was stating a fact. I had a dream, she said, the night before graduation. A nightmare. I saw everything that could go wrong. Adrian glanced at her. That's not the whole truth. No. She met his eyes for a moment. But it's what I can tell you right now. He nodded. That's fair. They drove the rest of the way in silence. But it was a comfortable silence. The kind that didn't need to be filled. That night, Isabella sat in her apartment with the incubator proposal open on her laptop and the emails spread across her desk. She had read the proposal 3 times. She had marked it up with questions and suggestions. She had added 2 pages of market research that Adrian hadn't included. Her notes filled the margins. Sharp and precise. The apartment was quiet. The wall outside her window was dark. The only light coming from her desk lamp and the glow of her laptop screen. She was in. She typed her response at 11:47 p.m., the same time Mia had called on graduation night. A small act of defiance. A reclamation of that hour. I'm in. Let's build this. His response came within minutes. I'll pick you up at 8 a.m. We start tomorrow. She closed her laptop and touched her grandmother's necklace. The silver warm from her skin. Tomorrow, she would start building something new. A business. A case. A future. She had a partner now, untested. But willing. She had evidence, incomplete. But growing. She had a purpose that went beyond survival. She wanted more than to win the fellowship. She wanted to tear down the system that had destroyed 3 women before her. She wanted to make sure no one else became a target. She checked her phone one last time before turning off the light. No new messages from Mia. No texts from Vanessa. Just silence. A text from an unknown number had arrived during her work. This is Caroline Bell from the Leland Fellowship Office. We've received your confirmation. Please prepare a 15-minute presentation on your proposed research. The interview panel will include 3 board members. We look forward to meeting you. Isabella read the message twice, then set her phone on the bedside table. The necklace caught the light from her lamp, throwing a small silver reflection onto the ceiling. The game had begun. And this time, she was playing to win. The incubator workspace was located on the 3rd floor of the university's Innovation Center, a glass and steel building that had risen during Isabella's junior year. It was the kind of building that announced ambition, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces, designed to catch the eye and hold it. The 3rd floor was an open-plan workspace with long tables covered in laptops and coffee cups, whiteboards covered in equations and mind maps. And that particular hum of productivity that came from people who believed they were building the future. Startup posters lined every wall, their slogans promising disruption and innovation. A foosball table sat in the corner, unused, a monument to good intentions. Adrian had reserved a small meeting room near the back, barely large enough for 2 people and a whiteboard. It smelled like dry erase markers and recycled air. The window looked out over a parking lot. But neither of them cared about the view. Isabella arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, carrying her laptop bag over one shoulder and a travel mug of coffee in her hand. She had been up since 6, reviewing her notes and adding to the file she was building. Adrian was already there, standing at the whiteboard with a marker in his hand, sketching out a market segmentation model in precise, deliberate strokes. He turned when she walked in. You're early. So are you. I never left. He gestured at the board with the marker. I had ideas I needed to get down before I forgot them. She set her bag down on the table and studied his sketches. The model was solid, well-structured. Clear segments. Target demographics clearly defined. He had put thought into this. But it was missing something. She pointed at the growth projection line. You're assuming linear growth. The data from the past 3 quarters shows a spike in the 2nd quarter of every year. Seasonal variation tied to end-of-year budget releases and academic calendar shifts. Adrian looked at the board, then back at her. Show me. She picked up a red marker from the tray and added a line to his graph, marking the seasonal spikes with small arrows. Then she added a footnote about the underlying causes, corporate grant cycles, fiscal year planning, the way universities released their innovation budgets in January. Her handwriting was precise. Each letter deliberate. When you factor in the seasonality, the addressable market is about 20% larger than your conservative estimate, she said, but the window for entry is narrower. You can't just launch when you're ready. You have to launch in the right quarter to capture the peak. Adrian studied her addition, his eyes moving along the adjusted line. He nodded slowly. That changes the timeline. It changes the strategy. She capped the marker. If we launch in the fall, we miss the peak entirely and spend 6 months fighting for scraps. If we launch in January, we're positioned perfectly for the Q2 wave. That's when the budgets open up and the decision makers are looking for places to allocate funds. How much time would we need to be ready by January? She thought for a moment, running the numbers in her head. 4 months of solid work. Maybe 5, depending on how fast we can validate the prototype. Adrian set his marker down on the tray and crossed his arms. That gives us until the end of October to have a working prototype. November for testing and iteration. December for the final pitch and investor materials. Assuming we win the incubator competition in September for the seed funding to cover development costs. Assuming we win. He looked at her, his expression serious. Are you confident we can? She met his eyes without blinking. I'm prepared. Confidence comes from preparation. They worked through the morning in a rhythm that felt natural, almost effortless. Isabella handled the market analysis, her fingers moving across the keyboard as she compiled data from industry reports, academic journals, and publicly available financial filings. Adrian worked on the financial projections, his calculations precise and deliberately conservative. They didn't need much conversation, each understood the other's workflow, the way their skills complemented each other. By noon, they had the skeleton of a solid proposal. Isabella had compiled 12 pages of market research. Adrian had built a financial model that projected revenue, costs, and break-even timelines. The business plan was taking shape. Adrian closed his laptop and stretched his arms above his head. Lunch. My treat. There's a place down the street that does sandwiches that are actually edible. Isabella hesitated. She had brought food from home, a turkey sandwich and an apple, packed that morning while her coffee was brewing. But she found herself not wanting to say no. Fine. But I'm paying for my own. We'll argue about that on the way. They walked to a small deli 3 blocks from the Innovation Center. The place was crowded with students and office workers, the line stretching almost to the door. Adrian ordered for both of them without asking, a turkey and avocado sandwich for her, roast beef for himself, and paid before she could argue. Outside, they found a bench near a small fountain. The water caught the afternoon light and scattered it into tiny rainbows. Jessica called me last night, Isabella said, unwrapping her sandwich. Adrian looked up from his. What did she say? She said she wants to talk again. Not about testifying specifically, about what she knows. She said there were things she didn't tell us at her house because she wasn't sure she could trust us yet. Are you going to meet her? Next week. She's coming to the city for a doctor's appointment. We're getting coffee after. Adrian nodded slowly. Good. She knows more than she told us the first time. I could see it in her face. She was holding something back. Isabella studied him over her sandwich. You're good at reading people. I'm good at watching. He took a bite and chewed thoughtfully. I spent a lot of time watching Mia and Vanessa before I made my move. You learn patterns. The way they sit. The way they glance at each other before answering a question. The way they use silence as a weapon. And what pattern do you see in me? He paused, his sandwich halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, giving himself time to think. You're carrying something heavy, he said. You don't show it. You've trained yourself not to, but it's there. In the way you check your phone before you speak. In the way you always choose a seat with your back to the wall. In the way you pause before you answer a question. Like you're measuring every word before you let it out. He met her eyes. You've been hurt before. By someone you trusted. And you're still figuring out how to trust again. Isabella didn't respond. She took a bite of her sandwich and chewed slowly, letting his words settle. I'm not asking you to tell me about it, he continued. I'm just saying that I see it. And I'm saying, you don't have to carry it alone. Whatever it is. The silence stretched between them. A pigeon landed near their bench, eyeing a fallen crumb. The fountain bubbled steadily. How did you learn to watch? She asked finally. Not the skill, the habit. Adrian looked down at his sandwich. He was quiet for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. My father is Marcus Chase, he said, CEO of Chase Holdings. You might have heard of him. She had. Chase Holdings was a major investment firm with offices in 3 countries, known for aggressive acquisitions and a reputation for ruthless efficiency. The business school had a case study on them. When I was growing up, I learned pretty quickly that people didn't talk to me because they liked me. They talked to me because they wanted access to my father. Every compliment, every invitation, every friendship, it all came with a price tag that I didn't know about until later. He paused, turning the sandwich over in his hands. So I learned to watch, to wait, to figure out what people wanted before they asked for it. That sounds lonely. It was. He looked up, meeting her eyes, but it taught me to recognize genuine people. People who don't want anything from me except my company. Isabella held his gaze. The fountain bubbled. The pigeon found its crumb and flew away. And what do you want from me? She asked. Your partnership. He said it simply, without hesitation. Your honesty, your trust, if you're willing to give it. That's a lot to ask. I know. He smiled slightly, a small curve at the corner of his mouth. That's why I'm asking, not demanding. They finished their lunch in comfortable silence. The fountain continued its steady rhythm beside them, and the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard. Isabella finished her sandwich and folded the wrapper into a neat square. You said you've been watching Mia and Vanessa for 6 months. What made you start? Was it just Jessica? Or was there something else? Adrian considered the question. It was Jessica mostly. But after I started digging, I found inconsistencies in other cases too. Scholarship recipients who seemed to come out of nowhere. Disciplinary actions that benefited specific people. A pattern of winners and losers that didn't match the academic records. And no one noticed. Maybe they noticed. But noticing and proving are different things. He crumpled his napkin and tossed it into a nearby trash can. Without hard evidence, all you have is a suspicion. And suspicions don't change anything. Isabella nodded slowly. She understood that better than most. They walked back to the incubator in silence. But it was a comfortable silence. The kind that didn't need to be filled. Isabella noticed that she had left her phone face up on the meeting room table when they returned. She had forgotten to check it before she ate. She hadn't thought about Mia once during lunch. Not once. That was progress. The afternoon was productive. They outlined the executive summary, refined the problem statement, and drafted the first full version of their investor pitch. By 5 o'clock, they had a document that was solid enough to show Professor Hartley for feedback. Adrian leaned back in his chair, stretching his arms above his head. That's a good day's work. Isabella saved the file and closed her laptop. It's a start. A strong start. He looked at her. Same time tomorrow. She nodded. I'll be here. She packed her bag and walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. Adrian. Yeah, thank you for telling me about your father. I know that wasn't easy. He was quiet for a moment. Neither was what you shared with me, about the dream. She nodded once. Then she left. The walk home took 20 minutes. The city was transitioning from afternoon to evening, the light turning golden, the streets filling with people leaving work and starting their nights. Isabella walked through it all without really seeing it, her mind still in the meeting room, replaying the conversation. He had shared something real, something vulnerable. She hadn't asked for it. And he hadn't used it as currency. He had just told her. She didn't know what to do with that. But she knew it meant something. When she reached her apartment, she sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. She had a fellowship presentation to prepare, evidence to organize, and a partner who was proving to be more than she had expected. She worked until her eyes blurred, then closed her laptop and touched her grandmother's necklace. The silver was warm from her skin, the edges smooth from years of wear. She thought about the women who had worn this necklace before her, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. They had faced their own battles, their own betrayals, and they had survived. So would she, one day at a time. That was how she would do this, not by looking at the mountain ahead, but by climbing one step at a time. She thought about Adrian's words at lunch, the way he had talked about his father. The loneliness of growing up surrounded by people who wanted things from him. She understood that loneliness deeply. She had felt it too, in her past life. surrounded by people who only cared about what she could give them. Mia had pretended to care, but it had all been a performance. Every hug, every late-night talk, every shared secret, just tools in a strategy to use Isabella and discard her. Mia had been one of those people. Isabella just hadn't known it until it was too late. But Adrian was different. He had offered his trust without demanding hers in return. He had shared his story without asking for payment. He had given her space to decide for herself. That meant something. She wasn't sure what yet, but it meant something. She set her alarm for 6 and closed her eyes. Sleep came slowly, but it came. 2 weeks passed in a rhythm that Isabella hadn't experienced since before her past life had collapsed. Mornings at the incubator with Adrian, refining the business plan and building the investor pitch. Afternoons working on her fellowship presentation, researching market trends and preparing her arguments. Evenings reviewing the evidence she had collected, the emails, the patterns, the timeline of destroyed careers. She was building something, and for the first time in 2 lives, she could feel the structure taking shape beneath her hands. The incubator project was progressing faster than she had expected. Adrian had connections she hadn't anticipated, alumni who worked at venture capital firms, industry contacts who agreed to review their market research, a former professor who now ran a successful startup and offered to mentor them. He brought in guest speakers and set up mock pitch sessions with real investors. He pushed her to think bigger, to consider angles she hadn't considered. And somewhere in the middle of all that work, Isabella found herself looking forward to seeing him. It wasn't a conscious choice. It happened gradually, in the small moments. The way he remembered that she took her coffee black with 1 sugar. The way he saved her the seat closest to the whiteboard without being asked. The way he handed her a marker during brainstorming sessions without interrupting her train of thought. Small things. Consistent things. She didn't label it. She didn't analyze it. She just noticed it. One evening, after a particularly long day of mock pitches and financial model revisions, they were the last ones left in the incubator. The cleaning staff had come and gone. The lights on the main floor had been dimmed to a soft glow. Only their meeting room was still brightly lit. A rectangle of light in the darkened space. Adrian closed his laptop and rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands. I think my brain is done for the day. It's sending me error messages. Isabella checked her phone. 9:47 p.m. She had been working for almost 13 hours, and her shoulders ached from hunching over the keyboard. I should go, she said, but she didn't move. Adrian didn't move either. He was looking at her with an expression that she couldn't quite read, not quite curiosity, not quite concern, something in between. What? She asked. Nothing. He shook his head. I was just thinking. About. He considered the question, turning it over in his mind before answering. About how different you are from what I expected. She raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? Someone cautious. Someone who kept people at arm's length. Someone who had been hurt and didn't want to be hurt again. He paused. And I was right. You are cautious. You do keep people at arm's length, but you're also driven, focused. You don't make excuses. And you don't give up. He met her eyes across the table. You're the most determined person I've ever met. Isabella didn't know what to say. The compliment had landed somewhere she hadn't prepared for. In a part of herself she had kept carefully guarded. You don't have to say anything. He added quickly. I just wanted you to know that I see it. What you're building. Who you're becoming. It's not nothing. She stood up, gathering her laptop and her notebook. Same time tomorrow. Same time. She walked to the door. Her hand was on the handle when he spoke again. Isabella. She turned. There's something else I should tell you. He was still sitting at the table, his hands resting on his closed laptop. Mia and Vanessa are planning something. I don't know what yet, but I've seen an increase in their communication over the past few days. They know you're working on something, and they're trying to figure out what. Isabella's grip tightened on her bag strap. How do you know? I still have access to the email monitoring system. They're being more careful now. They're using encrypted messaging for the actual planning. But they slipped up yesterday. There was a reference to the graduation project. Isabella's blood went cold. The graduation project. That's what they called their plan to set you up the first time. If they're using that same phrase again, they're planning something similar. Her mind raced. She had been so focused on building her new life, the incubator project, the fellowship prep, the evidence collection, that she had almost forgotten about Mia and Vanessa. Almost. Thank you for telling me. I promised I'd watch your back. He held her gaze. I meant it. Isabella, whatever they're planning, we'll face it together. She nodded once. Then she left. The walk home was different from usual. The streets seemed darker, the shadows longer. Every car that slowed near her made her heart rate spike. Every face in a window seemed to be watching her. She had known Mia and Vanessa wouldn't give up. She had known they would come after her again. But knowing and experiencing were two different things. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her grandmother's necklace warm against her skin, her mind turning over possibilities like a machine that wouldn't stop. What were they planning? Another accusation? Another staged scene? Something worse? She sat up at 2:00 a.m. and opened her laptop. The light from the screen illuminated her small apartment, casting shadows across the bare walls. She had been collecting evidence for weeks, but she hadn't organized it into a coherent case. She had emails and timelines and patterns, but she didn't have a clear plan for how to use them. She started building one. First, she created a folder structure in her documents: emails, witness statements, timeline, evidence chain, legal references. She populated each folder with everything she had: the emails from the library archives, the notes from her conversation with Jessica, the timeline Adrian had assembled, the names of the 3 previous victims. Then she opened a new document and began to write. She called it, The Chen-Reid Pattern, Evidence of Systemic Academic Manipulation at Leland University. She organized it into sections: introduction, timeline of incidents, victim testimonies, email evidence, pattern analysis, conclusion and recommendations. She wrote until the sky outside her window turned from black to gray to pale blue. By the time the sun rose, she had 37 pages of analysis, structured and sourced and ready to present to someone who could act on it. She saved the document, backed it up to 2 different cloud accounts, and closed her laptop. Then she lay back down, closed her eyes, and slept for 2 hours. Her phone buzzed her awake at 7:15 a.m. A text from Adrian. Mia just scheduled a meeting with Dean Barnes. Today at 2 p.m. I don't know what she's planning, but I thought you should know. Isabella read the message twice. The fog of sleep cleared instantly, replaced by a sharp, cold clarity. She typed her response. I'll be at the incubator by 8. We have work to do. She showered in 5 minutes, dressed in the first clean clothes she found: black pants, a white blouse, her grandmother's necklace, and walked out the door without checking her reflection. The meeting with Dean Barnes happened at 2 o'clock. Isabella wasn't in the room, but Adrian had arranged for a graduate assistant he trusted to keep watch and report back. The report came at 3:30. Mia had filed a formal complaint. The allegation: Isabella Sterling had accessed restricted student email accounts after her graduation, in violation of university privacy policy, and had misappropriated confidential student communications. Isabella sat in the empty meeting room at the incubator, reading the message on her phone. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was even. She had expected this. Mia and Vanessa had a playbook, and the first move was always the same: accuse first, create doubt, force the target into a defensive position. But this time, the accusation wasn't about cheating or assault. It was about evidence. Mia had found out about the emails. She didn't know what Isabella had found, but she knew Isabella had something, and she was trying to discredit it before Isabella could use it. That's smart, Isabella said quietly. I'll give her credit. Adrian walked into the room. What's smart? She showed him the message without a word. He read it, his jaw tightening as he processed the implications. She's trying to get the evidence thrown out before you can present it. I know. She's claiming you accessed the emails illegally. I know. She could be right. Technically. He ran a hand through his hair. You accessed the archive system after graduation. If they argue that your access privileges should have been terminated the moment you walked across that stage, Then I need to prove that my access was still valid at the time. Isabella stood up, her voice steady. And I can. The library policy states that accounts remain active for 30 days after graduation for the purpose of retrieving academic records. I accessed the emails on day 3. I have screenshots of the login confirmation and the session timestamps. Adrian studied her, something shifting in his expression. You're not worried. I'm prepared. She met his eyes. I've been preparing for this my whole life. No, I've been preparing for this for 2 lives. He didn't understand the reference. She didn't expect him to. I need to make a call, she said. She walked out of the meeting room and down the hallway to the stairwell. The door swung shut behind her, cutting off the hum of the incubator. She stood in the stairwell, alone with the echo of her own breathing, and dialed Jessica Tran. The phone rang 3 times before Jessica answered. Isabella. Jessica. I need your help. What happened? Isabella told her everything. The meeting with Dean Barnes. The complaint. The accusation. The timeline. When she finished, Jessica was quiet for a long moment. They always do this, Jessica said finally. They accuse you of something to discredit your evidence. It's what they did to me. They created a cloud of suspicion that followed me everywhere, even after I was cleared. I know. The difference is, you saw it coming. You have the emails saved. You have the library records. You have Adrian. A pause. And you have me. Will you testify? I'll do more than testify. Jessica's voice was steady, stronger than Isabella had ever heard it. I'll bring evidence of my own. I kept everything, the emails, the letters, the investigation report, the recordings of the phone calls I had with the scholarship committee. I kept it all in a box under my bed. I didn't think I'd ever need it again, but I kept it. Isabella closed her eyes, a wave of relief washing through her. Thank you, Jessica. I know this isn't easy. Don't thank me yet. Jessica's voice hardened. Thank me when they're gone. When they can't do this to anyone else. They hung up. Isabella stood in the stairwell for a long moment, her phone in her hand, her heart beating steady and strong in her chest. Mia had made the first move, but Isabella had been preparing for this fight for 2 lives, and she was ready. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air of the stairwell fill her lungs. Then she straightened her shoulders and pushed open the door. She walked back into the incubator meeting room to find Adrian on his phone, his expression tense. He ended the call when she walked in. That was the graduate assistant, he said, setting his phone down on the table. Dean Barnes scheduled a preliminary hearing for this Friday. Mia will present her complaint in front of a 3-person faculty panel. Isabella sat down slowly. Friday. That's 3 days away. It's too fast. Normally, complaints like this take weeks to process. Someone pushed for an expedited timeline. Vanessa's father. That would be my guess. Adrian leaned back in his chair. They want to catch you off guard. Hit you before you have time to prepare a defense. Then they don't know me very well. Isabella opened her laptop. I've been preparing for weeks. I have 37 pages of evidence analysis. I have witness statements. I have a timeline that goes back 3 years. Let them come. Adrian read the first few pages of her document. When he looked up, there was something new in his eyes. You really are ready. I told you. He nodded. Then we make sure they can't silence you. We. He held her gaze without flinching. Partners. Remember. Isabella looked at him, the way he said, we, without hesitation. The way he had stayed when he could have walked away. Partners. She repeated. The word felt strange but right. Let's get to work. They worked until midnight, building the case. Adrian drafted the statement while Isabella organized the evidence into a clear timeline. They cross-referenced dates, checked facts, and anticipated every question the faculty panel might ask. When Isabella finally walked home, the streets were quiet and the stars were bright overhead. Her mind was clear despite the late hour, and her steps were steady. The fight was coming, and for the first time, she wasn't facing it alone. The preliminary hearing was held in a small conference room on the 2nd floor of the administration building. The room smelled like old coffee and furniture polish. A long oak table dominated the center, surrounded by 8 chairs, 3 of which were occupied by faculty panel members. Isabella arrived at 1:45 p.m. 15 minutes early. She was wearing a black blazer over a white blouse, her grandmother's necklace visible at her collarbone. Her laptop bag hung from her shoulder, containing 37 pages of evidence, 3 witness statements, and a timeline that went back 3 years. Adrian had offered to come with her. She had told him no. This was her fight. She needed to face it alone. The panel consisted of 3 people: Professor Hartley, whom she trusted; Dean Barnes, whom she did not; and a woman she didn't recognize, mid-50s, silver hair, sharp glasses, who introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Walsh from the Office of Academic Affairs. Isabella took a seat at the table, leaving an empty chair between herself and the panel. She placed her laptop in front of her, already open to her evidence file. Mia arrived at 1:55 p.m., accompanied by Vanessa. Vanessa was not on the witness list. She wasn't a party to the complaint, but there she was, walking into the room like she owned it, taking a seat against the wall with her arms crossed and her expression smug. Isabella didn't react. She had expected this. Dean Barnes called the hearing to order. This is a preliminary inquiry into a complaint filed by Mia Chen against Isabella Sterling. The complaint alleges that Ms. Sterling accessed restricted student email accounts after graduation, in violation of university privacy policy. Mia spoke first. She had prepared a statement, neatly printed on lined paper, and she read from it in a trembling voice that was designed to sound brave. Your Honor, Professor Barnes, I discovered last week that someone had accessed my student email account after graduation. When I checked the access logs, I found that the account had been logged into from an IP address associated with the university library. The timing matched a visit Miss Sterling made to the library 3 days after graduation. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I have nothing to hide. But the idea that someone was reading my private communications, my personal emails, my medical information, my private conversations, it's devastating. I came here because I believe in the integrity of this university, and I believe that what Miss Sterling did was wrong. Dean Barnes nodded sympathetically. Miss Sterling, do you have anything to say in response? Isabella stood up slowly. She didn't look at Mia. She didn't look at Vanessa. She looked at the panel, at Professor Hartley, at Dr. Walsh, and finally at Dean Barnes. Yes, I do. She opened her laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. A document appeared, the university's library policy on graduate account access. According to university policy, student email accounts remain active for 30 days after graduation for the purpose of retrieving academic records and personal correspondence. I accessed the library's archive system on May 18, 3 days after graduation. I was within my rights to do so. That's not the issue. Mia interjected. The issue is that you accessed my emails without my permission. Actually, that is the issue. Isabella clicked to the next screen, a screenshot of the library's access log, showing her login time and date. I didn't access your email. I accessed the university's email archive system, which stores copies of all student communications as part of the university's data retention policy. The system doesn't distinguish between senders and recipients. It stores everything. Dean Barnes leaned forward. Ms. Sterling, are you saying you accessed the entire archive? I accessed the archive to retrieve my own academic records. In the process, I discovered emails that were relevant to my own personal safety and academic standing. Relevant how? Isabella clicked to the next screen. The email chain appeared, Mia's messages to Vanessa, laid out in chronological order. I discovered that Mia Chen and Vanessa Reed conspired to have me arrested on graduation night. The plan was to eliminate me from consideration for the Leland Fellowship. This was not the first time they had done this. They have targeted at least 3 other students in the past 3 years. The room went silent. Professor Hartley adjusted his glasses. Ms. Sterling, those are serious allegations. I'm aware, and I have evidence to support them. She spent the next hour presenting her case. She walked the panel through the timeline, the 3 previous victims, the pattern of accusations, the email evidence, the witness statements. She showed them Jessica Tran's testimony, Sarah Kim's records, Marcus Webb's transfer documents. She laid it all out on the screen, organized and sourced and undeniable. When she finished, the room was quiet enough to hear the clock ticking on the wall. Mia's face was pale. Vanessa had stopped looking smug. Dean Barnes cleared his throat. This is more extensive than I expected. Because I've been preparing for this, Isabella said. I knew that when I came forward with this evidence, I would be accused of obtaining it improperly. So I made sure I had proof that my access was legal. I made sure I had witnesses who could corroborate the pattern. I made sure I had everything I needed to clear my name and expose the truth. She turned to face Mia directly for the first time. You set me up to be arrested. You destroyed 3 other students' lives. And you came here today to accuse me of violating your privacy because you knew I had evidence against you. She paused. How dare you? Mia opened her mouth, but no words came out. Dr. Walsh spoke for the first time. Ms. Sterling, the Office of Academic Affairs takes these allegations seriously. We will need time to review your evidence and conduct our own investigation. I understand. In the meantime, I would recommend that all parties refrain from discussing this matter publicly. I understand. Dr. Walsh looked at Dean Barnes. I think we've heard enough for today. Dean Barnes nodded slowly. This hearing is adjourned. We will reconvene once the investigation is complete. Isabella closed her laptop and packed it into her bag. She didn't look at Mia or Vanessa as she left the room. She didn't need to. She walked out of the administration building into the late afternoon sun. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She had done what she came to do. Her phone buzzed as she reached the sidewalk. A text from Adrian. How did it go? She typed back. I told the truth. Let's see what they do with it. His response came quickly. Proud of you. She looked at the message for a long moment. Then she smiled and put her phone away. Outside the incubator building, the evening light was golden. Isabella found Adrian waiting on a bench near the entrance. He stood when he saw her. Well, the panel is reviewing the evidence. They'll reconvene after the investigation. That's good. That's more than I expected. It's a start. She sat down on the bench next to him. I didn't expect to feel this way. What way? Relieved. She looked at the sky. I've been carrying this for so long. The secret, the fear, the knowledge of what they did to me. And now that I've told someone, now that it's out there, I feel lighter. Adrian was quiet for a moment. That's called trust. The weight gets lighter when you share it. She looked at him. Is that what we're doing? Sharing weight. I think so. He met her eyes. I think that's exactly what we're doing. The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Isabella felt something shift in her chest, a door opening that she had kept locked for years. Adrian. I know. His voice was soft. You're not ready. And that's okay. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't know what to say, so she didn't say anything. She just sat there, next to him, watching the sun set over the city. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. You handled yourself well in there. Professor Hartley caught up with her as she walked across the quad after the hearing. He fell into step beside her, his hands in the pockets of his tweed jacket. I have been on more faculty panels than I care to count, and I have rarely seen someone present evidence with such clarity and composure. I had time to prepare. You had more than time. You had conviction. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I want you to know that I saw what you did. Not just today. Over the past 4 years, I have watched you grow from a promising student into someone who understands that knowledge is only valuable when you use it. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He patted her shoulder once. Keep me updated on the fellowship interview. I have a feeling we will be reading about you in the alumni newsletter soon. She smiled at that. Thank you, Professor. As he walked away, Isabella felt something settle in her chest. Not relief exactly. Something closer to validation. The first person in authority had looked at her evidence and said she was right. She walked back to the incubator to find Adrian pacing the lobby. He stopped the moment he saw her, his eyes searching her face. Well, the panel is reviewing the evidence. They said they will reconvene after the investigation. That is good. That is more than I expected for a first hearing. It is a start. She sat down on the bench near the entrance. The adrenaline from the hearing was wearing off. leaving her tired and hollow. I did not expect to feel this way. What way? Relieved. She looked up at the ceiling. I have been carrying this for so long. The secret, the fear, the knowledge of what they did to me. And now that I have told someone, now that it is out there, I feel lighter. Adrian sat down beside her. That is called trust. The weight gets lighter when you share it. She looked at him. The late afternoon light coming through the glass doors caught his features. Is that what we are doing? Sharing weight. I think so. He met her eyes. I think that is exactly what we are doing. The moment stretched between them, fragile and electric. Isabella felt something shift in her chest. A door opening that she had kept locked for years. Adrian. I know. His voice was soft. You are not ready. And that is okay. I am not going anywhere. She did not know what to say, so she did not say anything. She just sat there, next to him, watching the shadows lengthen across the lobby floor. That night, she slept better than she had in weeks. The investigation took 10 days. 10 days of waiting, of checking her phone every few minutes, of jumping every time an email arrived in her inbox. 10 days of working at the incubator with Adrian, trying to focus on the business plan while her mind was elsewhere. She spent the evenings reviewing her evidence, making sure everything was in order. She called Jessica Tran 3 times to confirm her testimony. She emailed Professor Hartley twice, asking for updates. She checked the university news page every morning, looking for any sign that the story had leaked. Nothing happened. The silence was worse than bad news. On the 11th day, she received an email from Dr. Walsh. The investigation into your complaint has concluded. Please report to room 312 of the administration building at 2:00 p.m. on Friday for the final determination. No preview. No hint. No indication of which way the decision had gone. Isabella read the email 3 times. Then she forwarded it to Adrian. Friday at 2. His response was immediate. I'll be there. She didn't ask him to come. He didn't offer. It was understood. Friday arrived slowly. The days crawling past like hours stuck in traffic. Isabella spent the morning at her apartment, unable to focus on anything. She paced. She checked her phone. She rearranged the papers on her desk for the 5th time. At 1:00 p.m., she put on her grandmother's necklace and walked out the door. The administration building looked the same as it had 10 days ago. Same polished floors. Same institutional beige walls. Same smell of old paper and floor wax. But Isabella felt different. She had done everything she could. The rest was out of her hands. Adrian was waiting in the hallway outside room 312. He was wearing a charcoal suit that made him look older, more serious. He straightened when he saw her. You don't have to be here, she said. I know. He held her gaze. I want to be. She nodded. Then she pushed open the door. The room was the same conference room from the preliminary hearing. The same oak table. The same chairs. But this time, the panel was different. Dean Barnes was there, his expression unreadable. Professor Hartley was there, his glasses in his hand, cleaning them with a cloth. Dr. Walsh was there, a folder open in front of her. And there was a 4th person, a man Isabella didn't recognize, older, distinguished, with silver hair and sharp eyes. Dr. Walsh spoke first. Ms. Sterling, thank you for coming. We have completed our investigation, and we are ready to share our findings. Isabella sat down. Her hands were steady on the table. Our investigation found that Ms. Chen and Ms. Reed engaged in a systematic pattern of targeting students who were competing with them for scholarships, internships, and academic opportunities. The evidence provided by Ms. Sterling was corroborated by multiple independent sources, including former students Jessica Tran, Sarah Kim, and Marcus Webb. Dr. Walsh paused, looking at Isabella over her glasses. The university has decided to expel Mia Chen and Vanessa Reed effective immediately. Their academic records will be marked with a permanent disciplinary notation. Additionally, the university is revoking the scholarships and awards they have received through fraudulent means, and the funds will be redistributed to the students who were harmed by their actions. Isabella's breath caught in her throat, including Ms. Sterling. Dr. Walsh continued. The Leland Fellowship has been informed of the situation. They have agreed to reinstate your application and will schedule a new interview at your convenience. The room spun slightly. Isabella pressed her palms flat against the table. The older man spoke. Ms. Sterling. My name is Harold Leland. I am the chairman of the Leland Fellowship Board. I have reviewed your file, your academic record, and the evidence you presented. I want to personally apologize for what happened to you. The system failed you. We will do everything in our power to make it right. Isabella couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. Professor Hartley smiled. I believe congratulations are in order. She stood up slowly. Her legs felt unsteady. She walked to the window and looked out at the campus she had almost lost. Isabella. Adrian's voice came from behind her. She turned. He was standing in the doorway. His expression soft. How do you feel? She thought about the question. She thought about her past life. Dying alone in a hospital bed. Never knowing the truth. She thought about waking up on graduation morning. The ceiling wrong. The date right. She thought about the phone call she hadn't answered. The emails she had found. The fight she had fought. She touched her grandmother's necklace. I feel like I'm finally living the life I was supposed to have. Adrian crossed the room and stopped in front of her. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. I told you I'd be here, he said, and I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him, at his steady eyes, his quiet confidence, the way he had showed up every single time without being asked. Adrian. Her voice was barely a whisper. Yeah, I think. She stopped, took a breath, started again. I think I'm ready to trust someone again. She saw the shift in his eyes, the understanding, the patience. You don't have to be ready all at once, he said. One step at a time is enough. She smiled, a real smile, not the careful one she had learned to wear. One step at a time. Outside the administration building, the sun was setting. The campus was quiet, the summer session students already gone for the day. Adrian walked her home. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. At the steps of her apartment building, she stopped and turned to face him. I have my fellowship interview next week. I know. The incubator project is on track for the competition. I know. She looked at him. And I'd like you to be there. For all of it. I will be. He said it simply. Like it was obvious. I told you. I'm not going anywhere. She reached out and touched his hand. Just for a moment. Just long enough to feel the warmth. Then she turned and walked up the steps. She didn't look back. But she didn't need to. She knew he was still there. The next morning, Isabella woke to a text from an unknown number. Isabella, this is Harold Leland from the Fellowship Board. I've taken the liberty of scheduling your interview for this Thursday at 10 a.m. I hope that works. We're looking forward to meeting with you. She stared at the message. Thursday. 4 days away. She typed her response. I'll be there. Then she set her phone down and touched her grandmother's necklace. The journey wasn't over, but the hardest part was behind her. The waiting was the hardest part. Isabella threw herself into the incubator project, spending 12-hour days at the Innovation Center. She refined the business plan, built financial models, prepared for the pitch competition that was still weeks away. Work was the only thing that kept her mind from circling back to the hearing. The evidence, the uncertain outcome. Adrian matched her energy. They worked side by side in the meeting room, sometimes in silence, sometimes debating strategy. He was patient with her silences and sharp with his feedback. They had developed a rhythm that required few words, an understanding that came from hours of shared focus. On the 5th day of waiting, Isabella received an email from Jessica Tran. I heard about the hearing. I wanted to check in. How are you holding up? Isabella typed back. I am okay. The waiting is worse than the hearing. Jessica's response came within minutes. I know. When I went through my investigation, the waiting nearly broke me. But you are stronger than I was. You will make it through this. Isabella read the message twice. Then she saved it in a folder labeled, Keep. On the 8th day, Adrian found something in the campus newspaper archives. An article from 3 years ago about a scholarship scandal that had been quietly buried. The names had been redacted, but the pattern was unmistakable. An anonymous accusation, a hurried investigation, a student who lost everything. Vanessa's father owns the newspaper that printed this, Adrian said, sliding the printout across the table. They buried the story on page 12 and never followed up. Isabella read the article. It was short, dismissive, clearly designed to make the accused student look guilty without saying so directly. The language was careful, the conclusions predetermined. They have been doing this for years, she said quietly, and no one stopped them. Until now. Adrian met her eyes. You stopped them. Isabella, you are the one who brought the evidence. You are the one who stood up in that room and told the truth. On the 10th day, the email from Dr. Walsh arrived. During those 10 days, Isabella learned something important about herself. She was not the same woman who had woken up on graduation morning, disoriented and afraid. That woman had been reactive, always waiting for the next blow to fall. This new woman was proactive. She prepared. She planned. She did not wait for things to happen to her. She spent her evenings building a backup plan. If the university ruled against her, she would take the evidence to the local news. She had already drafted a letter to the editor, carefully worded, ready to send. She had copies of every document stored in 3 separate locations. She had a lawyer ready to file a civil complaint. Adrian found her working on the contingency plan late one night. You really thought of everything. I had to. In my experience, the system does not protect people like me. It protects people like them. Then we changed the system. He sat down across from her. One case at a time. She looked at him. You really believe that? I have to. Otherwise, what is the point of any of this? She did not have an answer to that. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not alone in this fight anymore. The week before the fellowship interview passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Isabella spent every waking hour working on her presentation, refining her arguments, practicing her delivery in front of her bathroom mirror until the words felt like they had always been part of her. She woke at 5 each morning, showered, dressed, and sat down at her desk with a cup of black coffee to review her notes before the sun was even up. She had created color-coded flashcards for each section of her proposal, organized by topic and likely follow-up questions. She had researched each member of the interview panel extensively, Harold Leland's investment philosophy, Margaret Chen's published papers, the London professor's recent research into Southeast Asian markets. She knew their backgrounds, their biases, their preferred methodologies. She had practiced her answers so many times that she could deliver them in her sleep. She timed herself repeatedly, adjusting the pacing until every section fit within its allotted minute. She anticipated questions and prepared answers. She researched each member of the panel, their backgrounds, their interests, their investment philosophies. Adrian was there through all of it. He reviewed her slides with a critical eye, marking up margins with suggestions and corrections. He sat through her practice runs without complaint, asking the hard questions that made her think deeper and answer better. He didn't offer empty praise. He offered sharp critique delivered with care, the kind that came from someone who genuinely wanted her to succeed. On Wednesday night, the evening before the interview, they sat in the incubator meeting room for what might be the last time. The space had become their sanctuary, whiteboards covered in notes, coffee cups abandoned on every surface. The quiet hum of the building settling in tonight. One more run-through, Adrian said. Isabella groaned, dropping her head onto her notes. I've done it 15 times. I could do it in my sleep. One more. Then you're free. She sat up, smoothed her hair, and pulled up her slides. She began her presentation with the same confident opening she had rehearsed 100 times. Thank you for this opportunity. My research focuses on emerging market behavior patterns that traditional economic models fail to predict. Her voice was steady. Her arguments were clear. She walked through the data, the methodology, the proposed application of her findings. By the time she reached the conclusion, she could feel the rhythm of the presentation clicking into place, each point building on the last, each transition smooth and natural. When she finished, Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Well, she asked, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. You're ready. You've been ready for weeks. Tomorrow is just the confirmation. Confirmation of what? That you belong there. He met her eyes across the table. That you've always belonged there. The panel is going to see what I saw the first time I watched you present, someone who thinks differently, who sees patterns that others miss, who has the discipline to turn insight into action. The words hit her somewhere deep, in a part of herself she had kept carefully guarded. She looked down at her hands, at the necklace resting against her collarbone. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything, for the evidence, for Jessica, for staying when you could have walked away. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. She looked up and met his eyes. You didn't have to help me. You could have kept your evidence to yourself. You could have watched from a distance like everyone else. But you didn't. You showed up every single day. And you never asked for anything in return. Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hands resting on the table. You're the first person in years who made me feel like I was more than my father's name. Like I had value beyond my family connections. Like someone saw me for who I am, not what I could give them. He paused. That's not nothing, Isabella. That's everything. The air between them thickened. She could feel something building, a tension that had been growing for weeks. Through shared meals and late nights and conversations that had nothing to do with the case or the business. Adrian, don't say anything. He stood up slowly, pushing his chair back. Not tonight. You have a big day tomorrow. Focus on that. We'll have time for everything else. She stood too. They were close enough that she could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his hands were still at his sides instead of reaching for her. After the interview, she said, I'll have something to say. He smiled, a real smile, warm and unguarded. I'll be here. She walked home alone, but the streets didn't feel empty. Her mind was full of the presentation, the interview, and the man who would be waiting when it was over. The Leland Fellowship interview took place in a high-rise building downtown, in a conference room on the 32nd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the entire city. The view was breathtaking, rivers and bridges and skyscrapers stretching to the horizon. Isabella arrived at 9:30 a.m., wearing a navy blue suit and her grandmother's necklace. She had practiced her answers so many times that the words felt like they belonged to someone else. Harold Leland met her at the reception desk. He was taller than she remembered from the hearing, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Ms. Sterling, thank you for coming. We're excited to hear your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Leland. I'm excited to share it. The panel consisted of 3 people. Harold Leland, a woman named Margaret Chin from the board of directors, who asked sharp questions about methodology, and a professor from a partner university who participated via video call from what looked like an office in London. Isabella set up her laptop, took a deep breath, and began. She presented her research on market behavior in emerging economies, the same research that had been the foundation of her undergraduate thesis, but expanded and refined. She had added new data from the incubator project, real-world applications of her theories. She had developed a concrete proposal for how the fellowship would support her work, with specific milestones and deliverables. When she finished, the panel asked questions. Margaret Chin pushed her on methodology. The London professor questioned her data sources. Harold Leland asked about the long-term implications of her findings. She answered each question with clarity and confidence. She didn't deflect. She didn't guess. She knew her material. And it showed. At 11:30 a.m., the interview was over. Harold Leland stood and shook her hand. Ms. Sterling, I've been on this board for 15 years. I've reviewed hundreds of candidates. I can honestly say I've never seen anyone as prepared as you. Your answers were precise. Your research was thorough. And your presentation was delivered with a confidence that most candidates take years to develop. Thank you, Mr. Leland. That means a great deal. Expect to hear from us within the week. She walked out of the building with her head high and her heart full. The sun was bright overhead. The city spread out around her, full of possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. Her phone buzzed as she reached the sidewalk. Adrian, how did it go? She typed back. I think I nailed it. His response came immediately. I never doubted it. Meet me at the incubator. I have a surprise. She smiled and started walking, her steps light, her future unfolding before her like a path she had always been meant to walk. Adrian was standing in front of the Innovation Center when she arrived. He was holding a small box wrapped in brown paper with a simple string bow. The afternoon sun caught his silhouette, making him look like something out of a dream. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." She unwrapped the paper carefully, savoring the moment. Inside was a small velvet box. She opened it slowly. A pair of silver earrings, shaped like roses, delicate and elegant, catching the light, perfectly matched to her grandmother's necklace. "I noticed you always wear the necklace," Adrian said. His voice was steady, but she could see the slight nervousness in his eyes. "You wear it every day, like it's part of you. I thought you might want something to match. For your new beginning." Isabella looked at the earrings, then at him. The words she had been holding back for weeks finally rose to the surface. "Unstoppable. Adrian, I have something to say." She stepped closer. He didn't move away. The space between them shrank until she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. "I spent a long time being afraid to trust anyone. I spent even longer being afraid to feel anything. After what happened with Mia, I told myself I would never let anyone close enough to hurt me again." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers brushing his jaw. "But you made it impossible to stay afraid. You showed up with evidence you didn't have to share. You stayed when you could have walked away. You believed in me before I believed in myself." His hand came up to cover hers, warm and steady. "I don't know what comes next, but I know I want you in it." He didn't answer with words. He leaned in and kissed her. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. Then it deepened, and Isabella felt something unlock inside her. 7 years of walls, crumbling in a single moment. When they pulled apart, she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "That was worth waiting for," she said. He laughed, a low sound that vibrated through her. "I was starting to think you'd never let me. Patience is a virtue, so I've been told." He looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "I've been waiting for that since the day you walked into the coffee shop." She touched her new earrings, the silver warm against her fingers. "Then let's not wait anymore." She timed her presentation 6 times, adjusting the pacing until it was exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds. 30 seconds for unexpected pauses or technical difficulties. She practiced her answers to potential questions in the shower, while making coffee, walking to the incubator. By the end of the week, she could deliver the entire presentation without looking at her notes. Adrian watched her 11th practice run with a critical eye. "You are rushing the methodology section. Slow down there." "I am excited about the methodology." "I know. That is why you rush. But the panel needs to follow your logic. Give them time to catch up." She slowed down. He was right. The night before the interview, she dreamed about her past life. She was back in the hospital room. The machines beeping. The nurse telling her the truth about Mia and Vanessa. She woke up gasping, her heart pounding. The sheets twisted around her legs. The necklace was still around her neck. She touched it, felt the familiar edges of the silver rose, and forced herself to breathe. "That is not real anymore," she whispered to the darkness. "That life is over." She got up, made coffee, and reviewed her notes until dawn. The Leland Fellowship office was in a high-rise building downtown, 32 floors of glass and steel. The elevator ride felt like an eternity. The reception area was all white marble and modern art. A woman at a glass desk who checked her name against a tablet and directed her to a conference room. Harold Leland met her at the door. "Ms. Sterling, we are excited to hear your presentation." The panel sat around a polished table. Margaret Chin from the board, the London professor on video, Harold Leland at the head. Isabella set up her laptop, touched her necklace, began. The days following the interview were filled with a new kind of waiting. Not the anxious waiting of the investigation, the tense, stomach-churning uncertainty of not knowing if justice would prevail. This was different. This was the hopeful waiting of a life that was finally moving in the right direction. Isabella wore the earrings Adrian had given her every day. They matched the necklace perfectly, creating a set that felt like armor and jewelry all at once. When she caught her reflection in windows or mirrors, she saw someone she barely recognized, a woman who had survived, who was building something new. who had learned to trust again. The incubator project was nearing completion. They had finalized the business plan, built a working prototype of their analysis tool, and scheduled the final pitch for the following week. Adrian had secured meetings with 3 potential investors who had expressed interest in their approach. Professor Hartley had agreed to write a letter of recommendation for their seed funding application. Everything that had once seemed impossible was falling into place. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after her interview, Isabella received an email that made her heart stop. Dear Miss Sterling, we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected as the recipient of the Leland Fellowship for the upcoming academic year. The committee was unanimous in its decision, and we look forward to seeing the impact your research will have on the field of international market analysis. Please report to our downtown office on Monday at 9:00 a.m. to finalize the paperwork and discuss the details of your award. Congratulations, Harold Leland, Chairman, Leland Fellowship Board. She read the email 5 times before she believed it. Then she read it again. Then she stood up from her desk, walked to her tiny kitchen, poured a glass of water, and drank it slowly. When she was calm enough to speak without her voice shaking, she called Adrian. I got it. You got the fellowship. I got the fellowship. There was a pause. She could hear him breathing. Then, I'm on my way. He arrived at her apartment within 20 minutes, slightly out of breath, his hair windblown from running. He was holding a bottle of champagne and grinning like he had won the lottery himself. Celebration, he said, holding up the bottle. Non-negotiable. I won't take no for an answer. They sat on the floor of her small apartment because her furniture consisted of a bed, a desk, and 1 wooden chair that wobbled if you leaned too far back. The apartment was barely 300 square feet, a kitchenette that was really just a counter with a hot plate, a bathroom so small you could touch both walls at once, and a main room that served as living room, dining room, and bedroom. It was cramped and bare and she loved it because it was hers. Adrian poured the champagne into coffee mugs. Because of course she didn't own wine glasses. She had never needed them. In her past life, she had never had anything to celebrate. The afternoon sun streamed through her single window, lighting up the dust motes that floated in the air like tiny stars. To Isabella Sterling, Adrian raised his mug. The most determined woman I've ever met. She clinked her mug against his, the ceramic making a dull sound. To Adrian Chase, the man who showed up when no one else did. They drank. The champagne was dry and crisp, and it fizzed on her tongue. So what happens now? He asked. Isabella leaned back against her bed, the mug warm in her hands. The fellowship starts in September. I'll have an office downtown, a research budget, and a year to prove my thesis. The incubator pitch is next week. After that, she paused, looking at him. After that, I don't know. Let's find out together. She looked at him. He was sitting cross-legged on her floor, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows, his hair slightly disheveled from running. He looked nothing like the guarded, watchful man she had met in the coffee shop. He looked open, hopeful, real. What changed? She asked. What do you mean? When we first met, you were careful, measured, you kept your distance, you watched more than you participated. He was quiet for a moment, turning the mug in his hands. I was watching to see if you were real, if you were genuine. I've spent my whole life around people who wanted something from me, my father's name, his connections, his money. I learned to be careful. And now, he set his mug down and met her eyes. Now I know you're not one of them. You don't pretend. You don't perform. You don't calculate what you can get from people before you decide to care about them. You just are. He paused. That's the rarest thing I've ever found. Isabella felt something shift inside her. Not a door opening this time, a wall coming down, brick by brick. Adrian. Yeah, I'm glad you showed up. She reached out and took his hand. I'm glad you're here. He squeezed her fingers. Me too. The incubator pitch was held in the Innovation Center's main auditorium. 100 seats, half of them filled with investors, faculty, and fellow entrepreneurs. A panel of judges at the front table, 3 venture capitalists and 2 university representatives. A timer on the screen, counting down from 15 minutes. Isabella stood backstage, Going through her notes one last time. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. Adrian appeared beside her, adjusting his tie. Ready. Ready. Then let's go show them what we built. They walked on stage together. The lights were bright, warm on her face. The audience was quiet, waiting. Isabella stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon. My name is Isabella Sterling. And this is my partner, Adrian Chase. We're here to present our project, the Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative. She delivered the pitch with a confidence that came from preparation and belief. She walked through the problem, the solution, the market opportunity. Adrian followed with the financial projections and the growth strategy. They moved seamlessly between each other, finishing each other's sentences, building a case that was compelling, complete, and undeniable. When the timer hit 0, the audience applauded. Not politely, genuinely. The judges asked questions. They answered them as a team, supporting each other, filling in each other's gaps. An hour later, the winners were announced. The Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative took first place. The prize was $50,000 in seed funding and a year of free office space in the incubator. Isabella stood on the stage, holding the oversized check, with Adrian beside her. Cameras flashed. People cheered. Somewhere in the audience, Professor Hartley was clapping, his glasses fogged with emotion. She looked at Adrian. We did it. No. He shook his head, his eyes bright. You did it, Isabella. I just helped carry the boxes. You built the whole thing. Partners. He smiled. Partners. The celebration lasted late into the night. Adrian took her to a quiet Italian restaurant downtown. The kind with candles on every table and a wine list that went on for pages. They ate pasta and talked about everything, their plans for the business, the fellowship, the future they were building together. What happens now? She asked again. The same question she had asked in her apartment. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. We keep building. Together. Business. Research. Life. Whatever comes next. We face it together. Together. She repeated. I like the sound of that. They walked home through the city streets, hand in hand. The stars were bright overhead. The air was warm. Isabella touched her necklace. Then she touched her earrings. She had found her way back to second chances. She raised her mug. They drank in silence for a moment. The champagne was good, crisp and dry. Seriously though, Adrian said, setting his mug aside. What does this mean for you? Isabella thought about it. It means I was right. About everything. The research. The sacrifice. The choice I made. She paused. It means I can finally stop running. He nodded slowly. That is a good feeling. What about you? Your father company. I told him about the incubator project. He said it sounds like a hobby. Adrian smiled without bitterness. I told him it is not a hobby. It is my future. And what did he say? He said we will see. Adrian shrugged. But I do not need his approval anymore. I have something I built myself. That is enough. Isabella looked at him. Really looked at him. The man who had spent his whole life being judged by his father's name. The man who had broken free. I am proud of you, she said. He met her eyes. I am proud of you too. The incubator pitch competition was held in a packed auditorium. Isabella stood backstage, going through her notes one last time. Her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. Adrian appeared beside her, adjusting his tie. Ready. Ready. Then let us go show them what we built. They walked on stage together. The lights were bright, warm on her face. The audience was quiet, waiting. More than 100 people filled the seats. Investors and faculty members and fellow entrepreneurs. Isabella stepped up to the microphone. Good afternoon. My name is Isabella Sterling. And this is my partner, Adrian Chase. We are here to present our project. She delivered the pitch with a confidence that came from weeks of preparation. She walked through the problem, the solution, the market opportunity. Adrian followed with the financial projections and growth strategy. They moved seamlessly, finishing each other's sentences. When the timer hit 0, the audience applauded. An hour later, they were announced as the winners. $50,000 in seed funding, a year of free office space. the validation that everything they had built was real. The news of Mia and Vanessa's expulsion spread through the university community like wildfire through dry grass. Within a week, it was front-page news in the student newspaper, the subject of heated discussions in faculty meetings, and the primary topic of whispered conversations in every coffee shop within a mile of campus. Isabella didn't follow the coverage. She didn't need to. She had what she wanted, her name cleared, her fellowship secured, her future restored. The details of Mia and Vanessa's downfall were someone else's story now. But on the Monday after the incubator victory, she received a message that made her pause. Isabella, this is Sarah Kim. I was one of the students Mia and Vanessa targeted. I heard what you did, the investigation, the evidence, the hearing. I wanted to say thank you. And I wanted to know if you'd be willing to meet. Sarah Kim, the first victim. The economics major who had lost her internship 2 years ago, whose academic career had been derailed before it could truly begin. Isabella responded, I'd like that. When and where? They met at a coffee shop near campus, a different one from the daily grind. A quieter place with soft music and comfortable chairs. Sarah was shorter than Isabella remembered, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and eyes that held the same guarded wariness Isabella recognized from her own reflection. She looked like someone who had learned not to expect good news. I didn't think anyone would ever stop them, Sarah said, stirring her coffee with slow, deliberate movements. After what happened to me, I thought they would just keep winning forever, that the system was designed for people like them, and people like me would always lose. They almost did keep winning. But you stopped them. Sarah looked up, her eyes searching Isabella's face. How? How did you know? How did you find the evidence? Isabella considered the question. How did she explain a rebirth, a past life, knowledge she had no right to possess? How did she explain that she had already lived this story once, and that she had died at the end of it? I had help, she said finally. Someone was watching them. Someone showed me the pattern, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. That's more than I had. Sarah's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. After I lost the internship, I stopped fighting. I convinced myself there was no point, that they were too powerful, too connected, that I would just make things worse if I tried. You're here now. You survived. That's not nothing. Sarah smiled slightly, a fragile expression that didn't quite reach her eyes. I guess not. Some days it doesn't feel like enough. But I guess it's something. They talked for an hour. Sarah had found a job at a small consultancy firm, doing data analysis for local businesses. She was considering going back to school, a master's program. Maybe, if she could find the funding. She was rebuilding, piece by piece. So are you, Sarah said, nodding at Isabella's coffee cup. Building something new. Isabella nodded. I am. Good. Sarah finished her coffee and set the cup down with finality. Keep building. Don't let them take any more from you than they already have. You deserve everything you're getting. Isabella promised she wouldn't. She walked home through the evening streets, thinking about Sarah's words. Keep building. Don't let them take more. She thought about Mia and Vanessa, sitting in their expensive apartments, trying to figure out how their perfect plan had fallen apart. She thought about Jessica Tran, who had kept evidence in a box under her bed for 2 years. She thought about Marcus Webb, who had transferred schools and was now thriving in a new environment. And she thought about Adrian, who had seen a pattern no one else had bothered to notice, who had collected evidence for 6 months before he even knew her name, who had given her the tools to fight back. She had started this journey with a single choice, not answering a phone call. That choice had rippled outward, changing everything. And now she was here, fellowship winner, business owner, partner to a man who had shown her what trust really meant. She was home. The Leland Fellowship orientation was held on the first Monday of September, in a conference room on the 15th floor of the downtown office building. The room was all glass and chrome, with a view of the river that made Isabella's breath catch every time she looked at it. Harold Leland met her at the door, his hand extended. Ms. Sterling. Welcome. We're honored to have you join us. Thank you, Mr. Leland. I'm honored to be here. She was given a desk and a shared workspace on the same floor. with a nameplate that read, Isabella Sterling, Leland Fellow, and a window that looked out over the city skyline. A laptop waited for her, already set up with her accounts. A file folder contained her research budget, her project timeline, and a list of resources available to her. As she sat down at her new desk, her phone buzzed. Adrian, how's the first day? Isabella smiled at the screen. Surreal. I have a desk, with my name on it, and a window. Adrian, told you, you belong there. Isabella, come see it tonight, I'll give you the grand tour. Adrian, I'll be there at 6. She set her phone down and opened her laptop. Her grandmother's necklace rested against her collarbone. Adrian's earrings caught the light as she moved. She began her first day as a Leland Fellow. At 6 o'clock sharp, Adrian arrived at the security desk in the lobby. Isabella came down to meet him, and they walked along the river together, the late afternoon sun glittering on the water like scattered diamonds. Different from the last time we were downtown together, he said. Very different. She remembered that walk, from the coffee shop, after their first meeting, when everything was uncertain and she didn't know if she could trust him. I was so careful with you. So guarded. You had reason to be. Maybe. She stopped walking and turned to face him. But I'm not careful anymore. Not with you. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Velvety and dark. Adrian, just open it. Please. She opened the box. Inside was a simple silver band. Not a ring but a band, engraved with a line of tiny roses that matched the pattern on her necklace and earrings. Delicate. Perfect. It caught the dying light and held it. I know it's early. His voice was steady, but she could hear the emotion underneath. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Isabella stared at the band. Her vision blurred. Are you? I'm not proposing. Not yet. He took her hand, his fingers warm against hers. I'm promising that I'll be here, that I'll keep showing up, that I'll build this life with you, whatever it looks like. The business, the fellowship, everything. The tears came before she could stop them. She didn't wipe them away. Adrian Chase. Her voice cracked. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, in this life or any other. He slipped the band onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. Good, he said, his voice rough. Because I'm not going anywhere. Not now. Not ever. She leaned in and kissed him. There on the riverwalk, with the sun setting behind them and the city lights beginning to flicker on across the water. Sarah had carried the weight of what happened for 2 years without telling anyone the full story. She had kept the emails, the letters, the investigation report, everything in a shoebox under her bed. I did not know why I kept them, she admitted. I thought I was being paranoid, but I could not throw them away. Isabella understood that impulse completely. They talked for an hour. Sarah had rebuilt her life in small ways. A job she liked. A small apartment she was making her own. Tentative plans to go back to school. She was not the bright-eyed student she had been before the accusation. But she was something else. Something harder. Stronger. What do you do now? Sarah asked as they finished their coffee. I start the fellowship next week. The incubator project is running. Isabella paused. I am finally living the life I was supposed to have. Sarah smiled. Good. You deserve it. They hugged goodbye at the door of the coffee shop. Sarah promised to come to the launch party. Isabella promised to keep in touch. Walking home, Isabella thought about the other victims. Sarah, Jessica, Marcus, the unnamed student from the buried newspaper article. They had all been hurt by the same system, the same people, and now that system had been cracked open. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for all of them. The fellowship orientation was held in a conference room on the 15th floor. Isabella sat at a polished table with 4 other fellows, all of them bright and accomplished. They introduced themselves one by one. A PhD candidate in economics, a public policy researcher, a climate scientist, an education reform advocate. When it was Isabella's turn, she said, I study emerging market behavior. I am interested in how economic patterns shift when traditional models fail to account for human psychology. Harold Leland nodded approvingly. Ms. Sterling is being modest. Her work has already been cited by 2 major research institutions. The other fellows looked at her with renewed interest. Isabella kept her expression neutral, but inside, she was smiling. After the orientation, Harold Leland pulled her aside. I meant what I said about your work. I have been tracking your progress since the investigation. You have a rare combination of analytical rigor and real-world application. Thank you, Mr. Leland. That means a great deal. Do not thank me. Prove me right. He smiled. I suspect you will. The advanced degree ceremony was held in the same main quad where Isabella had received her undergraduate diploma, but everything else was different. Same white chairs arranged in precise rows. Same families filling the bleachers with cameras and tissues. Same bright blue sky overhead. But Isabella was not the same woman who had sat in those chairs 8 months ago. She sat in the front row now, wearing her grandmother's necklace and Adrian's silver band. Her cap was square on her head, her gown pressed and perfect. Beside her, in the row behind, Adrian sat with his hand resting on her shoulder. A solid, warm presence. The dean called the graduates by school. When Isabella's name was called, Isabella Marie Sterling, Master of Business Administration, summa cum laude, she walked across the stage with steady steps and took her diploma. She didn't look back at the past. She looked forward. After the ceremony, she found Adrian under the old oak tree where she had first seen him after her undergraduate graduation. The same tree, its branches spread wide. The same man, standing in the same spot. But everything had changed between then and now. Full circle, she said, as she reached him. New circle. He shook his head, smiling. Not the same one. You don't go back to where you started. You start somewhere new. She considered that. You're right. I'm not the same person I was that day. No. He looked at her, his eyes warm. You're stronger. You're freer. You're exactly who you were meant to be. They walked through the campus together, past the library where she had found the emails, past the innovation center where she had built her business, past the coffee shop where it had all begun with a vague text message. So what's next? Adrian asked. Isabella thought about it. The fellowship was secured and underway, her research already yielding interesting results. The business was growing, with 3 employees and a growing client list. She had a partner who had proven himself 100 times over, in ways both big and small. I'm thinking about expanding the firm. With the fellowship research and the incubator network, we could take on bigger clients. International work. Maybe. That's a solid plan. And I'm thinking about something else. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady. I'm thinking about forever. Adrian went very still. Isabella, I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other long, measured in months. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. But I've lived 2 lives. Adrian, in my first life, I never got to this moment. I died alone in a hospital room at 30 years old, betrayed by someone I trusted, with nothing to show for my years except pain and regret. His eyes widened slightly. She continued before he could speak. But in this life, I made a different choice. I didn't answer that phone call. And because of that choice, I met you. I learned to trust again. I built something that matters. She touched her necklace, then her earrings, then the band on her finger. I found you, Adrian, and I'm not letting you go. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, right there in the middle of the campus walkway, with students walking past and birds singing in the trees above. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. Forever sounds good, he said. Yeah. They walked hand in hand through the campus that had once been the site of her greatest defeat and was now the foundation of her greatest triumph. 3 months later, the Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative had its official launch party in the incubator space. The office was full of people, Professor Hartley, who had written their first letter of recommendation, Jessica Tran and Sarah Kim, who had flown in for the occasion, Harold Leland, who had invested personally in the firm, and a dozen other faces that had become part of Isabella's new life. Isabella stood near the window, watching the crowd. Adrian appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. Congratulations. Partner, congratulations to us. She took the glass. We built this. Together. She looked at him, this man who had changed everything. His silver band glinted on his finger next to hers. Matching. Right. Together. She agreed. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the office was quiet, they stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Happy? Adrian asked. Isabella considered the question. She thought about her past life, the loneliness, the fear, the desperate hope that someone would save her. She thought about her present, the business, the fellowship, the love she had found when she had stopped looking. I'm more than happy, she said. I'm whole. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against him. The two of them silhouetted against the city skyline. Her grandmother's necklace caught the light. The earrings sparkled. The matching bands on their fingers were warm against each other. In her first life, she had died alone. Her name dragged through the mud. Her future stolen by the people she trusted most. In this life, she had made one different choice. One phone call she hadn't answered. And that choice had led her here, to a man who loved her. A career she had built with her own hands. And a future that stretched out before her, bright and unlimited. She touched the necklace one last time. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered, for the necklace that had been her anchor, for the strength that ran in her blood, for the legacy of women who had survived before her. Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair, ready to go home. She turned in his arms and looked at him. I'm already home. They walked out of the office together, hand in hand, the city lights twinkling around them like 1,000 small promises. The silver band on her finger caught the light. It looked like a star. The office space on the third floor of the Innovation Center had transformed in the months since the incubator victory. What had been an empty room with a window was now a functioning workspace. Desks and computers. A whiteboard covered in strategy notes. A small kitchenette where they kept coffee and snacks for the team. Isabella's name was on the door, right next to Adrian. Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative. Her grandmother necklace was around her neck. The earrings Adrian had given her were in her ears. The silver band was on her finger. She had broken the circle entirely and started something new. At the launch party, Jessica Tran toasted to new beginnings. Sarah Kim toasted to not giving up. Professor Hartley toasted to the best student he had ever taught. Harold Leland took Isabella aside. You know, when I started the fellowship, I hoped it would find people like you. People who do not just study the market. They understand it. Thank you, Mr. Leland. Call me Harold. And keep doing what you are doing. The world needs more people who refuse to stay down. When the party wound down and the last guests left, Isabella and Adrian stood at the window, looking out at the city. We did this, she said. We actually did this. You did this. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I just helped. Partners. Partners. She touched the necklace one last time, thinking of the women who had worn it before her. Her grandmother, her great-grandmother, the unknown women further back who had survived their own battles. She had carried their strength forward, and now she was building something to pass on. Adrian's hand found hers, their matching bands warm against each other. Ready to go home? He asked. She looked at him, the man who had seen her at her worst and stayed. The man who had shown her that trust was not a weakness. I am already home. They walked out of the office together, hand in hand, the city lights twinkling around them like stars. The Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative grew faster than either of them had expected. Within 6 months, they had 5 employees and a client list that included 2 Fortune 500 companies. Within a year, they were profiled in a national business magazine. Isabella was quoted in the article. I learned that the most important market to understand is the one inside yourself. Once you know what you are worth, you stop accepting less. Adrian framed the article and hung it on the office wall. They kept the office in the Innovation Center, even though they could have afforded something fancier. It was where they had started, where they had built everything from nothing. It felt like home. On the 1-year anniversary of their first meeting, Adrian took Isabella back to the daily grind. Same coffee shop. Same corner table. Same navy blazer. Look how far we have come, he said. She looked around the coffee shop that had been the starting point of everything. We were so careful with each other that day. We were strangers. Now we are partners. He reached across the table and took her hand. And more than partners. She smiled. And more than partners. The silver bands on their fingers caught the light. Matching. Perfect. Right. The advanced degree ceremony was held in the same main quad where Isabella had received her undergraduate diploma, but everything else was different. Same white chairs arranged in precise rows. Same families filling the bleachers with cameras and tissues. Same bright blue sky overhead. But Isabella was not the same woman who had sat in those chairs 8 months ago. She sat in the front row now, wearing her grandmother's necklace and Adrian's silver band. Her cap was square on her head. Her gown pressed and perfect. Beside her, in the row behind, Adrian sat with his hand resting on her shoulder. A solid, warm presence. The dean called the graduates by school. When Isabella's name was called, Isabella Marie Sterling, Master of Business Administration, summa cum laude, she walked across the stage with steady steps and took her diploma. She didn't look back at the past. She looked forward. After the ceremony, she found Adrian under the old oak tree where she had first seen him after her undergraduate graduation. The same tree, its branches spread wide. The same man, standing in the same spot. But everything had changed between then and now. Full circle, she said, as she reached him. New circle. He shook his head, smiling. Not the same one. You don't go back to where you started. You start somewhere new. She considered that. You're right. I'm not the same person I was that day. No. He looked at her, his eyes warm. You're stronger. You're freer. You're exactly who you were meant to be. They walked through the campus together, past the library where she had found the emails, past the innovation center where she had built her business, past the coffee shop where it had all begun with a vague text message. So what's next? Adrian asked. Isabella thought about it. The fellowship was secured and underway. Her research already yielding interesting results. The business was growing, with 3 employees and a growing client list. She had a partner who had proven himself 100 times over, in ways both big and small. I'm thinking about expanding the firm. With the fellowship research and the incubator network, we could take on bigger clients. International work. Maybe. That's a solid plan. And I'm thinking about something else. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Her heart was beating fast, but her voice was steady. I'm thinking about forever. Adrian went very still. Isabella, I know it's fast. I know we haven't known each other long, measured in months. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. But I've lived 2 lives. Adrian, in my first life, I never got to this moment. I died alone in a hospital room at 30 years old, betrayed by someone I trusted, with nothing to show for my years except pain and regret. His eyes widened slightly. She continued before he could speak. But in this life, I made a different choice. I didn't answer that phone call. And because of that choice, I met you. I learned to trust again. I built something that matters. She touched her necklace, then her earrings, then the band on her finger. I found you, Adrian, and I'm not letting you go. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, right there in the middle of the campus walkway, with students walking past and birds singing in the trees above. When they pulled apart, he was smiling. Forever sounds good, he said. Yeah. They walked hand in hand through the campus that had once been the site of her greatest defeat and was now the foundation of her greatest triumph. 3 months later, the Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative had its official launch party in the incubator space. The office was full of people, Professor Hartley, who had written their first letter of recommendation, Jessica Tran and Sarah Kim, who had flown in for the occasion, Harold Leland, who had invested personally in the firm, and a dozen other faces that had become part of Isabella's new life. Isabella stood near the window, watching the crowd. Adrian appeared beside her, 2 glasses of champagne in his hands. Congratulations, partner. Congratulations to us. She took the glass. We built this together. She looked at him, this man who had changed everything. His silver band glinted on his finger next to hers. Matching. Right. Together. She agreed. Later that night, When the guests had gone and the office was quiet, they stood at the window looking out at the city lights. Happy? Adrian asked. Isabella considered the question. She thought about her past life, the loneliness, the fear, the desperate hope that someone would save her. She thought about her present, the business, the fellowship, the love she had found when she had stopped looking. I'm more than happy, she said. I'm whole. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against him. The two of them silhouetted against the city skyline. Her grandmother's necklace caught the light. The earrings sparkled. The matching bands on their fingers were warm against each other. In her first life, she had died alone. Her name dragged through the mud. Her future stolen by the people she trusted most. In this life, she had made one different choice. One phone call she hadn't answered. And that choice had led her here, to a man who loved her, a career she had built with her own hands, and a future that stretched out before her, bright and unlimited. She touched the necklace one last time. Thank you, Grandma, she whispered, for the necklace that had been her anchor, for the strength that ran in her blood, for the legacy of women who had survived before her. Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair, ready to go home. She turned in his arms and looked at him. I'm already home. They walked out of the office together, hand in hand, the city lights twinkling around them like 1,000 small promises. The silver band on her finger caught the light. It looked like a star. The office space on the third floor of the Innovation Center had transformed in the months since the incubator victory. What had been an empty room with a window was now a functioning workspace. Desks and computers. A whiteboard covered in strategy notes. A small kitchenette where they kept coffee and snacks for the team. Isabella's name was on the door, right next to Adrian. Sterling Chase Market Analysis Initiative. Her grandmother necklace was around her neck. The earrings Adrian had given her were in her ears. The silver band was on her finger. She had broken the circle entirely and started something new. At the launch party, Jessica Tran toasted to new beginnings. Sarah Kim toasted to not giving up. Professor Hartley toasted to the best student he had ever taught. Harold Leland took Isabella aside. You know, when I started the fellowship, I hoped it would find people like you. People who do not just study the market. They understand it. Thank you, Mr. Leland. Call me Harold. And keep doing what you are doing. The world needs more people who refuse to stay down. When the party wound down and the last guests left, Isabella and Adrian stood at the window, looking out at the city. We did this, she said. We actually did this. You did this. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. I just helped. Partners. Partners. She touched the necklace one last time, thinking of the women who had worn it before her. Her grandmother. Her great-grandmother. The unknown women further back who had survived their own battles. She had carried their strength forward, and now she was building something to pass on. Adrian's hand found hers, their matching bands warm against each other. Ready to go home? He asked. She looked at him, the man who had seen her at her worst and stayed. The man who had shown her that trust was not a weakness. I am already home. They walked out of the office together, hand in hand. The city lights twinkling around them like stars. The silver band on her finger caught the light as she walked through the door of their new office. Adrian was already there, reviewing the morning reports. He looked up when she entered, and his face softened into the smile that had become her favorite view. Morning, partner. Morning. She crossed the room and kissed him, brief and warm. Busy day ahead. The best kind. She touched her grandmother's necklace, then her earrings. Then the band on her finger. 3 generations of women who had survived. And now she was building something worthy of their legacy. 2 coffee cups sat on the counter. 2 sets of keys by the door. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. Small evidence of a life they were building together. One day at a time. In her first life, Isabella died alone. In this life, she had found everything. If this story kept you listening until the end, subscribe to Warm Era. The next romantic revenge story is already waiting.